Long before the rise of emperors or the shaping of dynasties, the land that would become China rested in quiet patience. Broad river valleys stretched like open paths through the earth, inviting early wanderers to follow their gentle curves. Mountain ranges stood in silent watch, their ridges shaping wind, clouds, and the movement of people. In these still places, the earliest rhythms of life formed, soft and unhurried, waiting to grow. Along the Yellow River, quiet pulses of water laid down fertile soil year after year, building a foundation for future communities. Far to the south, the Yangtze flowed with a slower, heavier grace, feeding valleys where dense forests met open plains. Seasons arrived in dependable cycles, bringing rains that nourished the land and shaped the habits of those who lived near it. Each landscape whispered different possibilities, guiding early groups in subtle ways. These early people did not yet think in terms of nations or histories. They followed food, warmth, and shelter, moving with the rhythm of the natural world. Over countless generations, small gatherings formed around riverbanks where fish were plentiful and soil responded willingly to early planting. The land itself suggested where to stay and where to journey on, its quiet guidance shaping choices long before leaders or written memory emerged to record them. In the far north, open grasslands encouraged movement, creating paths for hunters who tracked herds across wide horizons. In the central plains, the soil invited experimentation with grains that would later sustain millions. In the mountains, hidden valleys offered protection and isolation, forming pockets where unique customs could grow. Every region nurtured a different pattern of living, as though the land was gently teaching the first inhabitants how to build their future. As communities grew, the landscape continued to define their experience. Rivers became corridors of connection, carrying people and ideas from one settlement to another. Floods, though dangerous, renewed the earth and reminded early groups of nature's power. Even the changing light of each season shaped the rhythm of life, suggesting times for rest, movement, gathering, and planting. The world seemed vast, yet every detail played its part in guiding humanity forward. It is easy to imagine the quiet moments these early settlers experienced, watching distant storms drift along mountain peaks, feeling morning mist settle across fertile fields, listening to the river's steady murmur under moonlight. Without knowing it, they were laying the first stones of a civilization that would span thousands of years. Their lives were simple, but the choices they made were shaped by forces older and more patient than they realized. When viewed from afar, it becomes clear how deeply a landscape can steer the course of history. The rivers offered nourishment, the plains provided space to grow, and the mountains protected what would someday become a great civilization. In these early days, no one knew what the land was preparing them for. Yet every quiet step they took drew them closer to the birth of a culture that would endure through ages. Long before the legendary emperors and the early dynasties, life along the Yellow River moved at a slower, quieter rhythm. The river, winding like a long golden thread across the northern plains, shaped the lives of the earliest communities who followed its bends. Its waters flooded, nourished, and retreated in cycles that repeated for generations, creating an environment where early human groups began to imagine a life not only of movement, but of settling. These first settlers belonged to cultures we now call Paleogang and, later, Yangshao, names assigned by modern archaeologists, yet representing ways of life thousands of years old. Their days were simple, almost meditative. People rose with the sunrise, tended to the land, shaped tools from stone, and ended their evenings gathered near quiet hearths, watching smoke drift into the dusk. Their world was small, but it was steady, and it allowed them something new: time to grow roots. The shift from wandering bands of hunter-gatherers to stable villages did not happen overnight. It was a gentle, almost imperceptible transition. At first, people returned season after season to places where wild grains grew easily. Then they began to scatter seeds intentionally, saving baskets of harvested millet for the next year. The land responded with abundance, and in that abundance came a subtle transformation. Families realized they no longer needed to move on. They could remain. They could build. The Paleogang culture, emerging around 7000 BCE, represents one of the earliest visible footprints of this settled life. Their villages were quiet clusters of homes, each made with packed earth and positioned with care. Excavations reveal simple grinding stones, used to turn millet into flour, and early forms of pottery, plain, thick vessels meant for storage and cooking. These objects, though basic, suggest a profound shift. Life was no longer solely about survival. It was becoming about planning, preparing, and imagining a future. In these early communities, pottery became more than a tool. It was evidence of time and patience. Clay had to be shaped, dried, tended, and fired with steady heat. People dedicated hours to a craft that required calm hands and careful attention. This rhythm of work, slow, thoughtful, and precise, gave rise to traditions that would echo for millennia. Each pot, each smooth stone tool, was a quiet declaration that humanity was learning permanence. As the centuries flowed by like the river itself, these settlements grew more sophisticated. By the time the Yangshao culture appeared, around 5000 BCE, the people along the Yellow River had developed a deeper relationship with the land and with each other. Their villages expanded, forming circular patterns around communal spaces. Homes were dug partially into the earth for insulation, giving them a grounded, sheltered feeling, almost like nests built for human families. Yangshao pottery introduced something especially striking: painted designs. Soft spirals, fish, birds, and geometric patterns flowed across clay surfaces in gentle red and black lines. These designs hint at early belief systems, early storytelling, and early attempts to understand the world through symbols. Whether these images were purely decorative or carried spiritual meaning, they remind us that even the oldest communities sought beauty in daily life. Agriculture became more refined during this era. Millet remained a staple, but people also cultivated hemp for fabric and raised pigs, dogs, and chickens. With more reliable food came greater stability. With stability came population growth. And with growth came the beginnings of social organization, shared tasks, shared rituals, and shared memory. The nights in these villages were likely peaceful. Fires crackled softly. Families prepared meals in clay pots. Children slept under thatched roofs while the river outside murmured through the darkness. The world was changing, but slowly, gently. Each new technique, each new tool, a small step toward something larger. From these early settlements would eventually rise towns, then cities, then the first political centers of what we would one day call China. But for now, life remained simple. The people of Peilagang and Yangshao were not thinking about empires. They were thinking about the next harvest, the next firing of pottery, the next season along the river that sustained them. And yet, without knowing it, they were laying the foundation of a civilization that would shape the world. As the millennia passed along the Yellow River, the quiet villages of earlier times slowly transformed. The land was the same, its winds still carrying dust across open plains, its rivers still shifting course in restless arcs. But the people began to change. Their hands grew more skilled. Their tools grew more refined. Their settlements grew more organized. And little by little, a sense of structure began to take shape, like a distant melody quietly forming its first notes. Around 3000 BCE, a new cultural horizon emerged, the Longshan culture. Named after discoveries in Shandong province, it represented a turning point in early Chinese history. If Peilagang and Yangshao were the gentle beginnings of settled life, then Longshan was the moment when that life realized it could become something larger, something with direction, hierarchy, and intention. The first sign of this shift appears in the pottery. Longshan artisans crafted a distinctive black ware, so thin and polished it seemed almost weightless. Some vessels were so delicate they rang with a high, clear tone when tapped, like a bell made from earth. These pieces required controlled firing, meticulous shaping, and skilled hands, suggesting a society capable of specialization. Not everyone made pottery anymore. Some farmed, some crafted, some oversaw the work of others. The division of labor was widening. Their villages, too, revealed a new kind of thinking. Rather than simple clusters of homes near fields, Longshan settlements often featured defensive walls of rammed earth, thick, towering structures pressed layer by layer using wooden frames. Building such a wall required coordination, leadership, and a shared belief that the effort was worth the time. The presence of these fortifications hints at growing tensions, competition for resources, disagreements between communities, or perhaps conflicts that were once small but had become too large to ignore. Inside these walls, the settlements showed signs of planned layout. Homes were arranged in patterns that suggested order, not randomness. Some areas seemed reserved for ritual activity, others for storage, and others for living. The rhythm of daily life grew more structured. Decisions were no longer made only at the level of the family or village. Something like leadership, something like authority, was beginning to emerge. Burial practices offer some of the clearest insights into this shift. Earlier cultures tended to treat individuals fairly equally in death. But Longshan cemeteries reveal a different pattern. Some graves were simple, while others were furnished with fine pottery, ornaments, and tools. The difference in these burials suggests that people were no longer equal in life. Status was forming. Wealth, influence, or lineage might grant certain individuals a different place in society. It was the faint outline of a hierarchy, still soft, still forming, but unmistakable. The daily atmosphere in Longshan villages likely carried both familiarity and something new. People still tended crops of millet, still raised pigs and dogs, still carried water from wells and rivers. But alongside these routines were shared projects, coordinated tasks, and perhaps even early councils or gatherings to discuss collective concerns. The community was not just a group of families living together. It was becoming an organized unit with shared responsibilities and shared vulnerabilities. Technology advanced as well. Early signs of silk production appeared during this period, hinting at industries that required both skill and coordination. The first known use of the potter's wheel also emerges around this time, its steady spinning a metaphor for the cultural momentum building across the region. With new tools came greater efficiency. With efficiency came surplus. And with surplus came opportunities for leadership and control. The changing relationship between people and their environment can also be felt. Longshan communities expanded into regions where agriculture could thrive, pushing the boundaries of earlier settlements. When resources became scarce or competition grew too tense, groups sometimes relocated or consolidated. This movement suggests that people were thinking on a broader scale, considering not only the needs of their household, but the trajectory of their community. And so, gradually, the idea of governance, still unspoken, still unnamed, began to form. Perhaps it started as a group of elders making decisions for the village. Perhaps it shifted toward individuals with particular authority, those who oversaw construction, those who led rituals, those who controlled the stores of grain. Whatever shape it took, the essence was clear: society was organizing itself. In this quiet but decisive era, the seeds of the future Chinese state were planted. Longshan culture did not produce a unified kingdom, nor did it write laws or carve monuments for rulers. But it revealed the possibility of central authority, coordinated labor, and social hierarchy. These currents, still gentle, still forming, would guide the next chapters of history. The villages along the river were no longer just villages. They were becoming centers of influence, stepping stones toward cities, and early mirrors of what a state could be. And somewhere along that long, earthen wall, or beside a delicate black bowl drying in the sun, one could almost sense the question forming, quietly, cautiously: when does a village realize it has become a state? Long before there were dynasties, cities, or recorded years, the early people of the land that would one day be called China looked at the world around them and searched for meaning. They watched rivers rise and fall, seasons shift with steady rhythm, and the skies sweep across the horizon in patterns both comforting and mysterious. From this quiet observation came a longing to understand where knowledge began, who first taught the skills of living, and how order emerged from emptiness. And so, in the soft cradle of early imagination, the legendary figures of the three sovereigns rose like guiding stars above the mist. Fuxi is often placed first among them. His role was gentle, yet transformative. People imagined him wandering the early earth with thoughtful eyes, observing the behavior of animals, the paths of clouds, and the movements of water. From these patterns, he created tools that helped humanity understand its place in a complicated world. He taught them how to fish with nets, how to hunt with systematic methods, and how to tame animals rather than chase them endlessly. Listeners drifting toward sleep may picture him standing beside a calm river, sketching the earliest symbols that would one day become the foundation of writing. The hexagrams of the I Ching are attributed to him, giving shape to a system of thought that bridged the human and the cosmic. Beside him stands Nuwa, a figure often described as both nurturing and profoundly creative. Her myth tells of a world still fragile, its skies cracked, its balance unsteady. In the story, Nuwa repairs the heavens with stones of many colors, patiently restoring order with a loving touch. She is also the one credited with forming humanity itself, shaping people from yellow earth and breathing life into them with a gentle intention. These images offer a soft comfort, a reminder that, according to ancient imagination, the world was not only built but cared for. To early listeners, Nuwa represented the idea that compassion is as essential to creation as power. Another of the three sovereigns, Shennong, embodies the spirit of curiosity and practical wisdom. Known as the divine farmer, he is the one who introduced agriculture, taught people how to cultivate grains, and organized the rhythms of planting and harvesting according to the seasons. Stories describe him tasting hundreds of herbs, learning their properties through experience, and sometimes suffering so that others would not. His figure blends bravery and gentleness, forming a bridge between the wild landscape and the early villages learning to survive within it. For a nighttime listener, Shennong's myth radiates a quiet sense of gratitude, the idea that the stability of daily life emerged from thoughtful exploration. As time moves forward in myth, the five emperors arrive, occupying a space where legend begins to brush against the edges of early political memory. Among them, Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, stands out as both cultural ancestor and symbolic origin of Chinese identity. He is credited with introducing the calendar, refining tools, and helping shape the earliest concepts of governance. Many inventions attributed to him, like the compass and early forms of writing, reflect the desire of ancient people to ground their achievements in a heroic figure. For the viewer lying in the dark, Huangdi's image feels steady, like a distant lantern marking the path between myth and history. Another figure, Yindi, the Flame Emperor, is often paired with Huangdi. Their relationship is sometimes described as one of rivalry, sometimes one of unity, but always one that moves the story of early civilization forward. Yindi is linked with early agriculture and medicinal knowledge, echoing Shennong's influence and reinforcing how essential these skills were to survival. Some legends even describe a great conflict between the two, symbolizing the merging of different tribes and cultures into a shared identity. These myths give form to transitions that archaeology cannot describe: ancient alliances, early migrations, and the slow weaving of diverse groups into a collective memory. Under the five emperors also appears Emperor Zhuanqiu, associated with the shaping of early cosmic beliefs. His myth connects humanity with celestial order, linking rituals and seasonal rhythms with the vastness of the sky. Another, Emperor Ku, carries associations with music, harmony, and cultural refinement. Their stories do not unfold like modern tales, with sharp plot points or dramatic turns. Instead, they drift like gentle currents, each figure embodying a unique aspect of early civilization: agriculture, order, medicine, art, and the cycles of nature. Yao and Shun, the final pair of the five emperors, represent the ideal of virtuous rulership. Yao is described as a leader who listened carefully, acted with humility, and placed the needs of his people above his own. When it came time to choose a successor, he selected Shun not because of lineage, but because of character. Shun, in turn, became a symbol of patience, fairness, and devotion to family despite hardship. Their stories carry a quiet moral clarity, offering early listeners simple truths: that leadership should be guided by virtue, that wisdom can come from unexpected places, and that harmony is maintained through compassion rather than force. These legendary figures do more than entertain. They function as cultural anchors, shaping how early people understood the world and their responsibilities within it. In their stories, agriculture is not merely a skill but a gift from wise ancestors. Writing is not simply a tool but a link between humanity and cosmic order. Governance is not just organization but a reflection of moral character. To the people who passed these tales along through countless generations, myth and daily life were intertwined, each giving meaning to the other. And yet beneath the poetry of these tales lies something deeper, an early human desire to explain how society came to be. As ancient communities grew more complex, their stories grew deeper, providing frameworks for ethics, identity, and shared memory. The myths bridged the gap between what people understood and what they could only imagine. They provided models for behavior, comfort during uncertainty, and a sense of connection to forces greater than themselves. For the modern listener lying softly in the dark, these myths offer more than historical insight. They invite a slower rhythm, a dreamlike state where the boundary between imagination and memory grows gentle. They allow us to step into the mindset of early people who gazed at the same moon, breathed the same seasonal wind, and asked the same questions that humans still ask today. Where did we come from? Who taught us how to survive? What stories help us understand our place in the world? Every civilization begins with such questions. Every culture shapes its earliest hopes into figures that guide the imagination. And in the myths of the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, the origins of Chinese identity unfold like a soft tapestry of creation, wisdom, and moral clarity. As the legends settle into the quiet of night, the path ahead becomes clearer. Beyond these mythic ancestors waits the moment when history begins to leave traces in earth and bone. The first dynasty is near, rising from a landscape shaped by both memory and dream. Immorally in imagination, leaving behind traces that spark curiosity and gentle wonder. Archaeologists searching the plains of central China have uncovered sites that hint at a society transitioning from scattered villages to something more structured. Among these is the Erlitou culture, often linked to the elusive Xia. Here, excavations reveal urban planning, foundations of buildings arranged with purpose, streets emerging from deliberate layouts, and artifacts that speak of craftsmanship and specialization. Pots, tools, and ceremonial objects suggest that some individuals held authority over others, guiding both labor and ritual. For listeners lying in the quiet of night, it is possible to imagine these early communities as small but ambitious, feeling the first stirrings of order in a previously untamed land. The transition from myth to early state structures is subtle, almost imperceptible. In earlier villages, daily life was guided by immediate needs, food, shelter, and survival. But within the emerging Erlitou settlements, we glimpse a society beginning to plan for the long term. Grain storage pits indicate foresight, while bronze tools and ornaments suggest specialization that requires coordination and knowledge sharing. Here, the seeds of governance were sown, not through decree, but through the slow accumulation of skills, the careful shaping of a society that recognized the benefits of order. Yet, because written records do not exist for this period, much remains uncertain. Historians rely on later chronicles, like the records of the Grand Historian, to piece together stories of Xia kings whose deeds are sometimes larger than life. Names such as Yu the Great appear, famous for taming floods and organizing canals, though it is impossible to know precisely how history and legend intertwine. The narrative is hazy, like a river flowing through morning mist, its course felt more than fully seen. This ambiguity invites reflection rather than anxiety, offering a gentle curiosity that draws listeners deeper into contemplation of beginnings. Yu's work, in particular, symbolizes the delicate balance between human ambition and nature's quiet authority. Rivers that nourished life also threatened it with seasonal floods, and managing them required patience, knowledge, and ingenuity. Whether or not you existed as a single person, the stories convey a society beginning to coordinate on a grand scale, a civilization learning that survival demanded foresight and collaboration. One can imagine communities watching water levels rise, listening to the murmur of canals being dug, and feeling both awe and respect for the natural forces they sought to harmonize. Life in early Xia settlements was likely a careful rhythm, alternating between work and ritual. Families tended fields of millet, raised animals, and maintained the homes that sheltered them. Children observed elders shaping bronze or clay, absorbing knowledge that would guide their own hands in the future. Ritual activity, prayers, offerings, and ceremonies wove the community together, providing shared meaning and reinforcing the subtle hierarchies forming across these early villages. Even in its quiet routines, a sense of collective purpose began to emerge. The archaeological traces of Erlitou, the supposed Xia capital, suggest not only practical organization but cultural sophistication. Bronze vessels, intricately decorated and carefully cast, indicate rituals that carried social significance. Certain areas of the settlement appear reserved for ceremonial or communal activities, while others were strictly functional. This division of space, though gentle, hints at authority and planning, the first murmurs of governance. It is a civilization finding its own shape, balancing the needs of survival with the desire for legacy and meaning. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of the Xia is this blending of uncertainty and imagination. The dynasty is not fully verifiable in the modern sense, yet it occupies an essential place in the story of China. Its ambiguity encourages reflection. How do we recognize the beginnings of order when evidence is fragmentary? How do human memory and imagination preserve the essence of a people's first steps toward organization? For listeners at night, these questions are soft sparks, gentle nudges toward curiosity that soothe rather than excite. As the Xia emerges in this interplay between myth and archaeology, it demonstrates the quiet persistence of human society. Communities that once moved with the seasonal rhythm of the land now invest in structures, labor, and knowledge that extend beyond immediate need. Authority begins to take form, not as oppression, but as coordination. The people of early Xia, or those who inspire the stories we know, are learning to work together, to balance ambition with patience, and to carve permanence into the shifting landscape of rivers and plains. In the hush of night, it is easy to imagine walking through these settlements, feeling the warmth of fires, hearing the distant rush of the Yellow River, and observing the first faint signs of a civilization stretching toward its future. The Xia is a reminder that even in moments of uncertainty, human ingenuity, patience, and cooperation quietly shape history. It exists as both story and possibility, bridging the misty realms of legend with the tangible hints left in earth and pottery. And so, the enigmatic rise of the Xia leaves us with a profound sense of beginnings. It is a dynasty we cannot fully know, yet one that hints at the slow, careful emergence of governance, planning, and culture. In these early settlements along the river, listeners may sense the first heartbeat of organized society, a gentle pulse that will echo through centuries, setting the stage for dynasties to come. It is here, in the space between myth and memory, that the first whispers of history begin to take form. The Yellow River, long called the cradle of Chinese civilization, has always been both giver and taker. Its waters carry life, nourishing fields and sustaining families. Yet these same waters can rise without warning, sweeping away homes, crops, and the fragile rhythms of daily life. In the earliest memories of the people along its banks, the river was more than a source of sustenance. It was a presence, unpredictable, powerful, and infinitely patient. And in these waters, legend tells of a man whose determination and ingenuity would forever change the relationship between humans and the natural world. Yu the Great. Yu's story is not one of instant triumph. It is a tale of relentless persistence, quiet courage, and deep empathy. The floods he faced were not a single event, but a recurring cycle of destruction that tested entire communities. Rather than seeking glory or immediate recognition, Yu devoted himself to the service of others, working tirelessly to channel, guide, and contain the river's might. Night after night, day after day, he traversed flooded plains, dug channels, reinforced banks, and measured the land with careful attention. In every movement, there was patience. In every plan, there was thought. To early listeners, Yu embodied the ideal that progress requires not only strength, but also endurance and foresight. The legend emphasizes method over might. Yu did not attempt to stop the floods by sheer force, but by understanding the river itself. He observed the flow of water, the rise of seasonal rains, and the way channels shifted after storms. Slowly, deliberately, he sculpted paths for the river to follow, creating canals, dikes, and reservoirs that worked with nature rather than against it. Each channel carved, each embankment raised, was a meditation on harmony, a quiet collaboration between human effort and the rhythms of the earth. One can almost imagine Yu wading through muddy waters, feeling the currents pull, adjusting his course with each step, listening to the whisper of the river as if it spoke. Yu's labor was grueling. The story tells that he spent 13 years devoted to the task, passing through villages without resting in his own home. He ate the simplest of meals and slept wherever the work required, prioritizing the safety and well-being of others above his own comfort. For listeners drifting toward sleep, these details are not meant to inspire anxiety or urgency, but admiration for a life committed to care, for the quiet power of sustained effort over time. In Yu, the world sees the possibility of shaping destiny through patience, persistence, and humility. The flood stories themselves carry symbolic resonance. Water, uncontrolled and overwhelming, represents the chaos that precedes order. By taming it, Yu is not merely preventing destruction. He is teaching humanity the first lessons in stewardship, cooperation, and organized society. Early communities could now plan for harvests, construct permanent settlements, and pass knowledge from one generation to the next with confidence that nature's whims could be guided, if not entirely constrained. In this sense, Yu's labor is both practical and philosophical, a narrative about balance, respect, and the potential of collective effort. The tools and methods Yu employed, as the legend recounts, were simple yet ingenious. He guided rivers into channels lined with earth and stone, created spillways to absorb excess water, and designed reservoirs to store life-giving flows for dry seasons. He consulted elders, coordinated labor, and adapted strategies when initial plans failed. The process was iterative, full of trial, reflection, and adjustment. It mirrors the delicate care with which early humans learned to interact with their environment, shaping society gradually through thoughtful observation and coordinated action rather than abrupt domination. Yu's story also carries the weight of communal values. He did not act alone. The myth emphasizes collaboration. Villagers followed his guidance, forming human chains, digging channels, and reinforcing levees. The act of taming the river became a shared effort, an early model of leadership that relied on consensus, persuasion, and mutual respect. Even as Yu emerged as a hero, his legend is inseparable from the quiet, persistent contributions of ordinary people. Their work is woven into the narrative, a reminder that the rise of civilization rests upon collective endurance as much as individual vision. In the soft glow of legend, Yu's life bridges the mythic and the practical. He is heroic not through conquest, but through care, patience, and understanding. The stories linger, shaping cultural ideals. A society values wisdom, hard work, and dedication to the common good. His example teaches that true authority arises from service rather than domination, and that the measure of greatness is often the quiet transformation one brings to the lives of others. Listeners may feel this quietly, almost subconsciously, as their thoughts drift with the rhythm of the tale, reflecting on what it means to act responsibly and harmoniously within a larger system. The river itself becomes a character in the narrative. Its moods are mirrored in the fortunes of those who live alongside it. Rising waters evoke tension, while controlled channels and levees bring relief, illustrating the ongoing dialogue between human ambition and natural forces. Yu's act of taming is a meditation on that dialogue, demonstrating that civilizations do not simply rise, they negotiate, adapt, and endure in conversation with the world around them. Even in myth, the lesson is subtle. Mastery comes not from domination but from understanding. Through these 13 years of tireless effort, the land was transformed. Settlements grew more permanent, agriculture flourished, and the first foundations of governance began to take shape. People could anticipate seasons, store surplus, and organize labor on a scale previously impossible. The river, once a source of fear, became a guide and partner in shaping human life. The flood's chaos had been reimagined as opportunity, a controlled force harnessed to build community and identity. In this way, Yu's story carries both literal and metaphorical weight, taming nature while simultaneously taming society, creating a model of structured civilization for generations to follow. For listeners lying in the quiet dark, the legend of Yu the Great is both soothing and inspiring. The narrative flows gently, like the river itself, at times slow and reflective, at times swelling with subtle tension, always resolving into calm. The story invites one to imagine vast floodplains, muddy waters redirected by patient hands, and villages growing steadily along newly channeled rivers. It reminds us that civilization often begins with single, deliberate acts of care, repeated patiently over time. And so, the myth of Yu the Great lingers in the mind like a soft current. The river continues to flow, the fields continue to yield, and the story continues to guide values, aspirations, and cultural identity. What began as a solitary vision, a patient shaping of the land, becomes the heartbeat of early Chinese civilization, a quiet but enduring reminder that order, stability, and society itself often begin with one person willing to labor faithfully, humbly, and persistently in harmony with nature. What if the birth of a civilization began not with armies or conquest, but with a single, patient act of reshaping the world itself? In Yu's hands, the question becomes living reality. After the rivers were tamed and floods controlled, the people of the Xia period settled into rhythms that were both familiar and profound. Life unfolded along the Yellow River and its fertile valleys with a steady, meditative cadence. Villages grew quietly, homes clustered in thoughtful arrangements, and the first glimmers of social organization began to shape how people lived, worked, and related to one another. Here, amid fields of millet and along gentle streams, the daily patterns of early Chinese civilization took form. Agriculture was the backbone of life. Families rose with the sun, tending plots of land where grains grew in long, orderly rows. Millet remained a staple, supplemented by barley and rice in the more southern reaches. Farmers carefully observed the seasons, noting the arrival of rains and the changing length of daylight. Each planting and harvest was a measured practice, carried out with patience and care. The gentle hum of labor filled the villages, the grinding of grain, the sowing of seeds, and the quiet conversation between neighbors planning irrigation or exchanging tools. The Yellow River, once a threat, now provided fertile silt and predictable water, turning toil into sustainable nourishment. Alongside agriculture, early bronze work began to emerge. Artisans, guided by a growing understanding of metallurgy, cast simple tools, ornaments, and ceremonial vessels. The metal gleamed softly in the sun, its smooth surfaces reflecting both utility and beauty. Bronze axes and knives allowed more precise farming and woodworking, while ritual vessels carried symbolic weight in communal gatherings. Craftsmanship was slow, deliberate, and meticulous, requiring hours of attention to detail. Each artifact reflected both skill and culture, a quiet testament to human ingenuity at the dawn of civilization. Life was not only practical, but also spiritual. Rituals marked the passage of seasons, the success of harvests, and the reverence for ancestors. Villagers gathered around fires in the evenings, offering thanks to the forces that sustained them. Incense, simple ceremonial objects, and communal feasts were integrated into daily life, blending reverence with routine. These rituals fostered a sense of shared identity, grounding the community in continuity and tradition. Even in these small acts, the early Xia people built structures of culture that would resonate for generations. Hierarchy began to take shape, subtle yet perceptible. Leaders emerged to oversee irrigation projects, coordinate communal labor, and organize defense against natural or human threats. Authority was not yet rigid or oppressive. It functioned as guidance, a framework allowing larger groups to coordinate without chaos. Burial practices from this period suggest distinctions in status. Some graves were more elaborate, containing bronze objects, ornaments, and tools. These quiet differences hint at the formation of social stratification, a necessary step as communities grew and tasks became more specialized. Children grew up within these rhythms, observing and learning through participation. They helped tend fields, carried water, and assisted in crafting tools or preparing communal meals. Storytelling, both practical and mythic, was a key part of education. Tales of the Great, floods, and ancestral heroes were woven into the fabric of daily life, subtly teaching values of patience, responsibility, and care. These narratives reinforced the idea that every action, however small, contributed to the well-being of the community. Evening brought its own gentle patterns. As the sun dipped behind distant hills, smoke from hearths drifted into the twilight, mingling with the soft sounds of the river. Families gathered together, sharing food, conversation, and quiet reflection. The pace slowed, giving space for contemplation and rest. The villages felt alive yet calm, a balance of work, ritual, and reflection that nurtured both body and spirit. Travel and trade were modest but meaningful. Communities exchanged tools, grains, and crafted goods along paths that followed the river and its tributaries. Such interactions allowed ideas, techniques, and styles to spread, fostering gradual cultural cohesion across a broader region. Knowledge of bronze working, agricultural methods, and ritual practices flowed along these routes, connecting otherwise distant settlements in a quiet network of shared understanding. The Xia period also witnessed the early development of record-keeping and symbolic communication. While writing as we know it had not yet fully emerged, simple markings and pictographs began to appear on objects and pottery. These signs conveyed ownership, ritual significance, or practical information. They were early steps toward written culture, small traces that hint at a growing human desire to preserve memory, guide future generations, and impose a gentle order on a complex world. Amid these rhythms, the natural world remained a constant presence. Farmers observed the river, noting the rise of floods and the retreat of water. Birds, animals, and the changing patterns of flora informed their daily decisions. The harmony between human activity and the environment became a defining feature of life in these villages. People learned not to conquer the land, but to coexist with it, guiding its resources carefully while respecting its power. The Xia period was not defined by grand battles or monumental constructions. Instead, its significance lies in its quiet cultivation of society. It was an era of measured progress, where human ingenuity, patience, and cooperation created the foundations for more complex civilizations. Villages matured into communities, skills became specialized, and rituals nurtured shared values. The narrative of Xia life is one of subtle growth, of ordinary people shaping extraordinary continuity. For listeners drifting in the quiet of night, imagining this world evokes a sense of calm immersion. Fields stretching under soft sunlight, artisans working carefully with bronze, the distant murmur of the yellow river, all form a sensory tapestry that is both relaxing and compelling. One can feel the continuity between effort and reward, labor and ritual, human ingenuity and the natural environment. It is a world both distant and intimate, guiding the imagination gently toward understanding, empathy, and curiosity. By the end of this period, Xia settlements had become self-sufficient yet interconnected, structured yet flexible, humble yet ambitious. Daily life, with its gentle routines, careful labor, and thoughtful rituals, prepared the way for the dynasties to follow. The Xia period may have begun in the mists of legend, but its people laid the foundations for the more visible, more historically attested civilizations that would rise along the Yellow River in the centuries ahead. And so, as the evening settles over these early villages, the rhythm of work, ritual, and rest continues. The Xia period, quiet yet profound, reveals the enduring patterns of human society, cooperation, ingenuity, and respect for the natural world. In this calm, steady unfolding of life. The dawn of Chinese civilization quietly, patiently, takes root. By the banks of the Yellow River, centuries of human effort had quietly shaped the landscape. Villages had become settlements, settlements had become small communities, and through patient labor, early states began to emerge. Among these, the Shang kingdom rose with a clarity and purpose that would echo across the millennia. Unlike its predecessors, the Shang left behind more than pottery, tools, or myth. It left evidence of organized cities, sophisticated metalwork, and a form of writing that allowed memory to be recorded and transmitted. For those who listen in the quiet of night, the story of the Shang is one of deliberate innovation, cultural ambition, and the subtle emergence of authority. The earliest Shang centers developed along the fertile stretches of the Yellow River, where land and water offered both opportunity and challenge. Kings ruled from walled settlements, strategically placed to oversee surrounding fields, trade routes, and resources. These cities were not sprawling by modern standards, yet they displayed careful planning, streets aligned with precision, ceremonial spaces marked for ritual, and workshops clustered for specialization. Every choice reflected foresight. Every wall and street whispered of an emerging understanding that a society's strength lies in coordination, organization, and shared vision. Bronze became the hallmark of Shang innovation. Artisans refined the process of alloying copper with tin, producing vessels, weapons, and tools of exceptional quality. Bronze was heavier than pottery, yet stronger and capable of holding intricate designs. Ritual vessels, often elaborately decorated with patterns of dragons, masks, and geometric forms, were used in ceremonies honoring ancestors and the divine. These objects were more than tools. They symbolized authority, culture, and the intimate connection between leadership and spiritual practice. A bronze vessel, carefully cast and polished, was at once practical and symbolic, a reflection of the society that created it. Shang rulers wielded both tangible and intangible power. Kings presided over ceremonies, directed construction, and oversaw military campaigns. Yet their authority extended beyond governance into the spiritual realm. Oracle bones, shoulder blades of oxen or shells of turtles, were inscribed with questions, heated until cracks formed, and interpreted as messages from ancestors. Through these divinations, rulers sought guidance on matters of agriculture, war, and succession. Writing on bones allowed memory to persist, creating an unbroken link between past, present, and future. In these early inscriptions, one can feel a civilization discovering the weight of permanence, the realization that human choices can be recorded, examined, and remembered. Expansion of Shang influence was gradual but deliberate. Kings secured surrounding territories, forging alliances, and sometimes engaging in conflict to protect or extend their resources. Armies were small yet organized, equipped with bronze weapons that gave them advantage over neighboring communities still reliant on stone or wood. Military campaigns were carefully planned, often accompanied by ritual, reminding participants that action in the physical world was intertwined with spiritual observance. For listeners, these accounts do not evoke anxiety or violence. They suggest the quiet accumulation of skill, strategy, and foresight that allows a society to grow steadily. Life within Shang cities combined the practical and the ceremonial. Farmers cultivated fields of millet, wheat, and rice, while artisans shaped bronze, jade, and pottery. Craftspeople worked alongside scribes who etched symbols onto oracle bones or early pottery, recording events, offerings, and transactions. Families lived within neighborhoods clustered around communal spaces, and children learned their roles by observation and participation. Every day reinforced the rhythm of the dynasty: work, ritual, and preparation for the future. The city was alive, yet its life was measured and deliberate, a reflection of both human ingenuity and respect for order. Religion and ritual were central to Shang identity. Ancestor worship linked rulers and commoners alike to the memory of those who came before. Ceremonial spaces within cities hosted offerings of food, vessels, and even human or animal attendants, believed to communicate respect and maintain harmony between the living and the spiritual. These practices reinforced social cohesion, creating a shared sense of purpose, morality, and cultural continuity. In the calm of night, one can imagine the flicker of ritual fires, the soft hum of chants, and the slow, deliberate movements of people honoring forces larger than themselves. Shang art and craftsmanship reveal a culture increasingly attentive to detail and expression. Bronze vessels carried intricate designs that combined utility with aesthetics, showing patterns that symbolized power, nature, and the divine. Jade ornaments were carefully carved, signifying status and spiritual connection. Even ordinary tools were shaped with care, reflecting the value placed on skill and precision. The Shang appear as a civilization discovering the subtle power of technology, that each innovation, whether in metal, writing, or urban planning, serves both practical needs and cultural identity. Trade and exchange became more prominent, connecting Shang cities with surrounding regions. Goods such as salt, jade, and bronze were exchanged, along with ideas, rituals, and techniques. Networks of exchange reinforced relationships, encouraged cooperation, and allowed innovation to spread. In these interactions, the Shang demonstrated an early understanding of interconnectedness, that strength and stability are supported not only by local resources, but by the wider flow of knowledge, skill, and shared culture. For the quiet listener, the rise of the Shang kingdom offers both relaxation and fascination. The dynasty's achievements unfold gently, without the need for dramatic tension. Its cities, artifacts, and rituals are tangible markers of human curiosity and organization. Kingship, bronze casting, oracle bones, and urban planning combine to create a world that is both ordered and awe-inspiring, yet calm enough for late-night contemplation. The rhythm of life, innovation, and ritual forms a soft, hypnotic pattern, one that encourages imagination to drift alongside the river, through streets, workshops, and ceremonial spaces. In this early kingdom, one can sense a civilization discovering the power of permanence. Metal and writing, carefully cultivated over generations, became tools for remembering, guiding, and shaping society. Leadership, ritual, and daily labor coexisted harmoniously, each reinforcing the other. Expansion, diplomacy, and planning unfolded deliberately, establishing patterns that would influence the development of Chinese culture for centuries. The Shang were not merely survivors. They were organizers, innovators, and visionaries, quietly transforming life along the Yellow River into a structured, enduring civilization. And so, the rise of the Shang kingdom reveals the delicate interplay of technology, governance, and culture. Bronze and oracle bones symbolize more than skill. They mark the moment when a civilization realized that it could shape its destiny, record its memory, and connect generations through both material and symbolic creation. For those listening softly in the night, the Shang kingdom flows into consciousness as a calm, yet compelling testament to the ingenuity, patience, and quiet ambition of early Chinese society. Amid the busy streets, workshops, and ritual spaces of the Shang cities, a subtle revolution was quietly unfolding, one that would ripple across centuries and define the very essence of Chinese civilization. It came not with armies or monumental architecture, but through small, deliberate scratches on bone and shell. The oracle bones, simple in form yet profound in function, offer us a window into the thoughts, fears, and aspirations of people living more than 3,000 years ago. For those lying quietly in the dark, these artifacts invite contemplation, the first human effort to capture thought and memory in lasting form. The process of divination was intricate and deliberate. Scholars and rulers chose bones, often shoulder blades of oxen or plastrons of turtles, and carefully prepared them, scraping the surfaces until smooth and suitable for writing. Questions about the future were etched onto these surfaces in an early form of Chinese script, using patterns of symbols that combined pictographic and abstract elements. Each incision was both practical and meditative, a careful act of communication bridging the earthly and spiritual realms. These marks, faint yet enduring, became the earliest permanent words known in China, the first attempts to translate thought into something that could outlast a human lifetime. Once the inscriptions were complete, the bones were subjected to heat. A hot rod was applied to the prepared surface, causing cracks to form. Diviners interpreted these cracks, reading them as messages from ancestors or cosmic forces. The questions carved into the bones ranged from practical to deeply existential. Would the harvest succeed this year? Was the river likely to flood? Would the king survive a military campaign? In their simplicity and directness, the oracle bones reveal the preoccupations of everyday life and the weight placed upon human decision-making in a world still closely intertwined with nature's whims. Beyond their practical role, these inscriptions reveal the early development of a written language. The symbols on the bones evolved over time, showing increasing sophistication in form and consistency. Even in their earliest stages, they combined imagination with precision, capturing both tangible events and abstract concepts. In some ways, the oracle bones were a mirror of Shang society itself, organized, deliberate, and mindful of consequences. Through these markings, we sense a civilization learning that words can preserve memory, guide action, and maintain continuity across generations. The content of the inscriptions also provides insight into social structures and cultural priorities. Questions often addressed by kings, diviners, and elders suggest a hierarchy in which knowledge and authority were concentrated, yet balanced by consultation with spiritual forces. Military campaigns, harvest predictions, childbirth, illnesses, and ancestral approval were all subjects of concern, reflecting a society deeply aware of its dependence on both natural and supernatural order. Listening softly in the night, one can imagine scribes hunched over bones by candlelight, carefully carving each character, their hands steady and minds focused on the balance between chance and fate. While the cracks revealed answers, the act of recording the question itself was profound. Each mark preserved intention, uncertainty, and hope. It was an early dialogue between humans and the world, a method of understanding forces too large to control directly. The act of writing became an extension of thought, a tool for reasoning, reflection, and decision-making. To hear this story in the quiet dark is to feel the first pulse of structured human thought captured permanently, an intimate whisper from a civilization discovering the power of words. Many oracle bones also include repetitions, corrections, or annotations, showing that the people of the Shang were not only recording questions but thinking critically about them. They observed cause and effect, reflected on outcomes, and refined their methods of divination. This careful attention hints at the cognitive leap writing allowed. Memory could be externalized, shared, and examined, creating continuity across space and time. The act of writing became both practical and contemplative, a bridge between the fleeting human experience and the permanence of recorded knowledge. The subjects of these inscriptions often highlight the concerns of both rulers and ordinary people. Kings worried about the success of battles or the health of livestock, while commoners were represented in questions about crops, childbirth, and domestic stability. In this way, the oracle bones reveal the breadth of Shang life, connecting the monumental with the mundane. They remind us that even in a hierarchical society, the rhythms of daily existence, birth, growth, sustenance, survival, were inseparable from governance and ritual. Symbolism and ritual permeated each step of the process. The bones themselves were considered sacred, conduits between the living and the ancestors. Carving symbols, heating the bones, interpreting cracks, all were acts performed with reverence. The process created a rhythm of attention and meditation, a structured way for individuals and society to confront uncertainty. Listening in the night, one can imagine the flicker of oil lamps casting shadows across these carefully prepared surfaces, the smell of heated bone mingling with incense, the soft murmur of interpretation, a quiet communion between humanity and the cosmos. Beyond ritual and governance, oracle bones reveal early tendencies toward abstraction and record-keeping. Over time, symbols developed into a system capable of representing not just objects or events, but relationships, intentions, and philosophical concepts. In this evolution, We see the beginnings of Chinese writing as both practical tool and cultural expression. Writing became a method of understanding, a lens through which society could observe itself and its world. For modern listeners, the experience is hypnotic, imagining thought made visible, intangible ideas transformed into permanent traces that would endure for millennia. The oracle bones also illuminate the values and fears of the Shang. Life was precarious, subject to natural forces, illness, and political uncertainty. Through written divination, the Shang sought reassurance, guidance, and a sense of control. They codified their hopes and anxieties in a tangible form, externalizing uncertainty into symbols that could be studied, interpreted, and acted upon. This act of inscription is profoundly human, a desire to bridge the unknown with deliberate action, to record intention against the backdrop of chance. For those listening in calm reflection, the story of Oracle Bones is more than historical curiosity. It is a meditation on beginnings, the emergence of language, the human impulse to communicate across time, and the soft power of recorded thought. Every inscription represents an individual contemplating existence, seeking guidance, and establishing continuity. In this quiet, deliberate process, we see the foundations of intellectual culture, governance, and memory itself. As writing began to take hold, it transformed society. Decisions could be recorded, successes and failures analyzed, and knowledge passed to future generations with clarity. Oracle bones were the first step toward a civilization capable of reflection, administration, and cultural sophistication. The earliest Chinese writing, carved in patience and reverence, anchored memory and permanence, allowing the Shang to both honor their past and shape their future. By the flickering light of legend and the permanence of inkless symbols etched on bone, the listener can sense the Shang civilization awakening intellectually. The oracle bones, humble yet profound, capture a culture in the midst of discovery. Its people learning that the act of writing can preserve thought, direct action, and cultivate understanding. In the quiet of night, these earliest words speak softly but insistently, connecting us to the fears, hopes, and careful contemplations of humans who lived thousands of years ago, tracing the birth of Chinese writing. In the heart of Shang cities, life was not only measured by harvests or battles, but also by the steady rhythm of ritual and reverence. Religion permeated every aspect of daily existence, creating a framework that bound communities together, reinforced authority, and guided decision-making. At the center of this system was ancestral worship, a practice that wove the memory of the past into the life of the living. Ancestors were not distant figures. They were present in the smoke of ceremonial fires, in the vessels offered upon altars, and in the careful attention given to divination. Listening quietly in the night, one can almost hear the soft murmur of prayers drifting through courtyards, the faint clatter of bronze vessels as they are set in place, and the hushed footsteps of those who serve both gods and family. The Shang believed that their ancestors could influence the world of the living. Kings and nobles performed rituals to honor forebears, offering food, drink, and symbolic objects in the hope of securing guidance, protection, or favor. These acts were precise and deliberate. Each motion, each placement of an offering, carried meaning. Rituals were often tied to the cycles of nature, planting, harvest, and the rising and setting of the sun, reflecting the interconnectedness of life, death, and the forces that govern the world. Even for ordinary villagers, participation in ceremonies created a sense of continuity, a soft reassurance that life was part of a larger order. Bronze became the medium through which much of this spirituality was expressed. Elaborately cast ritual vessels, shaped with patterns of dragons, masks, and abstract symbols, were more than functional items. They were conduits between the living and the divine. Food, wine, or other offerings were placed within these bronzes during ceremonies, each act imbued with reverence and intention. The gleam of polished metal and candlelight, the sound of a vessel being set upon an altar, and the quiet movement of participants all contributed to a sensory experience that was both solemn and mesmerizing. For the listener lying in the calm of night, These images evoke a world that is ordered, intentional, and profoundly interconnected. Lavish tombs were another reflection of Shang values. Kings and nobles were buried with objects that they might need in the afterlife: bronze vessels, ornaments, weapons, and sometimes even human attendants. These tombs were carefully arranged, reflecting hierarchy, status, and belief in continuity beyond death. The effort and craftsmanship invested in burial practices demonstrate the importance of ritual in sustaining society and affirming identity. Even in the soft, dreamlike quiet of contemplation, one can imagine tombs as silent testaments to human care, preparation, and respect for the cycles of life. Daily life in Shang society was intimately tied to these rituals. Farmers, artisans, and scribes all contributed to a culture where spiritual practice and practical labor were intertwined. Bronze workers might be called upon to cast vessels for ceremonies. Scribes recorded events and divinations that guided both kings and villagers. Even the simplest acts, preparing food, maintaining the home, caring for animals, were framed within the larger context of respect for ancestors and the natural world. Ritual and routine, labor and worship merged seamlessly, creating a society where every action had significance beyond immediate survival. Hierarchy was clear yet subtle. Kings held ultimate authority, overseeing military campaigns, political decisions, and ritual ceremonies. Nobles and high-ranking officials administered local communities and organized labor for both practical and ceremonial purposes. Ordinary villagers performed essential work but also participated in rituals, connecting them to both leadership and the sacred. Social stratification was reinforced not through harsh coercion, but through shared values, responsibilities, and the mutual recognition that every role contributed to the stability of the kingdom. The interplay of hierarchy and ritual created cohesion, allowing society to function efficiently while honoring tradition. Music and sound also played a role in ritual life. Bells, drums, and chimes accompanied ceremonies, adding rhythm and resonance to movements and offerings. The vibrations of metal and wood enhanced the sensory experience of ritual, marking moments of transition and attention. Listeners might imagine these soft sounds echoing through courtyards, mingling with murmured prayers and the movement of participants, creating a hypnotic, immersive atmosphere that reinforced cultural values and the emotional weight of communal activity. Symbols embedded in ritual objects carried layers of meaning. Dragons and masks represented power, protection, and the unseen forces that shaped existence. Patterns on vessels reflected natural cycles, cosmology, and moral guidance. Each symbol invited contemplation, linking the mundane to the sacred. For someone imagining Shang society in the quiet of night, these objects become touchstones, subtle guides through a world where every shape, design, and gesture is imbued with significance. Even beyond the palace and temples, ritual informed the rhythm of everyday life. Seasonal festivals marked planting and harvest, community gatherings reinforced shared norms, and ancestral observances punctuated moments of individual reflection. The Shang understood that the strength of a kingdom is not only in walls, weapons, or wealth, but in the shared patterns of belief and practice that give life meaning and coherence. Participation in ritual created a shared emotional experience, softening the boundaries between classes and generations, and fostering empathy and loyalty across society. In this immersive, ritualized world, time flows differently. The past, present, and future are interconnected through ceremony and memory. Ancestors are active participants in shaping decisions. The living honor the dead with careful attention and deliberate acts. Life is measured in cycles of labor, celebration, and reflection, each reinforcing the values and stability of the community. The Shang Kingdom, through its rituals and social structures, demonstrates that civilization can thrive when culture, spirituality, and human organization align in gentle, persistent harmony. For the quiet listener, the Shang rituals evoke both fascination and serenity. Imagining the flicker of ceremonial fires, the gleam of bronze vessels, and the hushed cadence of prayers creates a mental landscape that is richly detailed yet soothing. Hierarchies and authority exist, yet they are expressed through shared understanding and ritualized behavior rather than harsh compulsion. The rhythm of the kingdom, ritual, labor, learning, reflection, provides a sense of stability, continuity, and gentle awe that lulls the imagination while cultivating curiosity about a world both distant and deeply human. By the end of this section, listeners can sense the Shang kingdom as a living, breathing society. Ancestor worship, bronze ritual vessels, ceremonial music, and carefully structured hierarchy all work together to create cohesion and meaning. Life was measured, deliberate, and infused with symbolic significance. The rhythm of daily labor intertwined seamlessly with ritual observance, guiding communities, supporting rulers, and fostering a shared sense of identity. In this calm, immersive atmosphere, one begins to understand the quiet power of culture, how rituals, symbols, and social structure can sustain a civilization long before philosophy or formal ideology emerges. The Shang reveal a society that is at once practical and transcendent. Through ritual, hierarchy, and spiritual practice, they built a kingdom bound together not only by walls and armies, but by attention, care, and shared values. For listeners drifting in the still of night, the Shang kingdom becomes a place of calm immersion, a civilization where every action, gesture, and sound carries meaning, and where the gentle rhythm of life offers both fascination and a subtle, soothing sense of order. The Shang dynasty, for centuries, had stood as a symbol of stability, ritual, and centralized authority. Its cities were bustling with artisans, scribes, farmers, and rulers who meticulously observed the cycles of nature and honored their ancestors. Bronze vessels gleamed in ceremonial halls, oracle bones captured the questions of kings, and rituals bound society together in quiet cohesion. Yet even the most enduring kingdoms are subject to change. Over time, signs emerged that the Shang's power, though formidable, was waning. The rivers that had once sustained life now witnessed the rumble of growing dissatisfaction and the quiet stirrings of ambition beyond its borders. In the west, along the fertile plains and rolling hills, a new power was rising, the Zhou. Initially one of many semi-autonomous states under Shang oversight, the Zhou were known for their strategic thinking, disciplined leadership, and skill in forging alliances. They observed the Shang carefully, learning not only from their successes, but also from the signs of their overextension and internal weakness. It was a patient rise, marked by diplomacy as much as by military preparation, a subtle accumulation of influence that set the stage for what would become a profound transformation in the Chinese political landscape. The tipping point came when the Zhou leader, King Wu, mobilized forces to confront the final Shang rulers. Battle was inevitable, but the story is not merely one of weapons and strategy. It is also a story of moral legitimacy, a principle that would shape Chinese political thought for millennia. According to tradition, the Shang had lost the mandate of heaven, the belief that a ruler governs not by personal might alone, but by virtue and moral authority. Signs of corruption, cruelty, and disorder suggested that the Shang had failed their duty to maintain harmony between heaven, earth, and humanity. In the quiet minds of Zhou strategists and later chroniclers, the idea emerged. Power is not simply inherited. It is granted, contingent upon just governance. This principle, the mandate of heaven, transformed the understanding of rulership. It framed political change not as arbitrary conquest, but as the natural and morally justified replacement of one dynasty by another. When King Wu and the Zhou forces triumphed over the Shang at the decisive Battle of Mai, it was more than a military victory. It was a symbolic moment, a validation of moral governance over mere power. For those listening in the night, the story carries a subtle tension and release. The old order falls quietly, its legitimacy questioned, and a new one rises, promising both stability and a higher sense of justice. The early Zhou rulers capitalized on this moral authority to solidify their power. They retained many Shang practices, ancestral worship, bronze ritual, and administrative structures, but reframed them to reinforce their own legitimacy. Ceremonies, laws, and appointments became expressions not only of authority, but of moral responsibility. Leaders were expected to act as caretakers of the people and the land, governing in accordance with both natural order and ethical principle. This approach created a profound sense of accountability, a gentle but pervasive philosophy that guided rulers and subjects alike. Territorial administration under the Zhou also evolved. Unlike the relatively centralized Shang, the Zhou implemented a feudal-like system of governance. Local lords were granted control over regions, yet they owed loyalty, tribute, and military support to the king. This decentralized network allowed for greater stability across a vast territory while encouraging local initiative and responsibility. Villages and towns were integrated into a larger political framework, bound together by allegiance, ritual observance, and shared understanding of the mandate of heaven. For night listeners, these structural details unfold slowly, building a sense of an organized, deliberate, and carefully maintained society. The cultural significance of this transition cannot be overstated. The fall of Shang and the rise of Zhou introduced the idea that authority must be justified through moral behavior. Kingship became more than inheritance. It was a covenant between ruler and ruled, a contract supported by ritual, ethics, and the perception of cosmic order. The narrative of transition emphasizes the weight of responsibility and the fragility of power, a lesson that resonated deeply with philosophers, historians, and ordinary people alike. Even in the quiet of night, one can sense the significance that civilization is sustained not merely by force, but by attention to balance, justice, and the expectations of both heaven and society. Military campaigns, while decisive, were carefully framed within ritual and ethical justification. The Zhou did not merely conquer. They declared their victory as a renewal of cosmic harmony. Captured territories were integrated into the feudal system, and local leaders were often co-opted into service rather than destroyed. The conquest was as much ideological as practical, a demonstration of how moral authority could shape outcomes and maintain long-term stability. For the listener, this aspect of the story is soothing rather than violent. It emphasizes order, strategy, and reason over chaos, casting the rise of the Zhou as an inevitable and balanced unfolding of history. As the Zhou established their rule, they set precedents that would echo across centuries. Ritual became a tool of governance as much as devotion, linking the king, the nobility, and the people into a coherent social and spiritual system. Bronze continued to play a role in ceremonies, while oracle bones gradually gave way to other forms of record-keeping, preserving memory and guiding decision-making. Cities and towns were planned with attention to hierarchy, access to resources, and defense, reflecting the growing sophistication of administration. The Zhou kingdom combined moral philosophy, practical governance, and symbolic representation into a structure that was at once stable, adaptable, and culturally rich. The transition from Shang to Zhou, then, is not just the story of one dynasty replacing another. It is the birth of an enduring political idea that the right to rule is earned, not merely inherited. It is a narrative that blends history, philosophy, and subtle ritual drama, inviting the listener to reflect on the conditions that make power legitimate, the responsibilities that accompany authority, and the ways human societies organize themselves to endure. In the quiet of night, this story unfolds gently, like the slow currents of the Yellow River itself, carrying with it the ideas, practices, and principles that would shape China's great age of thought. By the end of this section, the listener is anchored in a world where political legitimacy and moral responsibility are intertwined. The fall of the Shang is understood not merely as defeat, but as a transformation, the rise of the Zhou as a deliberate, morally grounded ascent. Every ceremonial act, administrative decision, and strategic campaign reflects the principle that power must be justified. For late-night listeners, the rhythm of history, the calm unfolding of events, and the emergence of a philosophical framework provide both fascination and serenity, preparing the mind to drift into deeper understanding and reflection as the story of Zhou continues. As the Zhou solidified their rule over the lands once dominated by the Shang, they introduced a principle that would outlast dynasties, shaping the trajectory of Chinese history for thousands of years: the mandate of heaven. It was not a law written on bronze or etched into stone, but a moral compass, a subtle yet powerful force that defined the legitimacy of rulers. The mandate suggested that authority is not inherited automatically, nor is it guaranteed by conquest alone. Rather, it is granted, contingent upon virtue, justice, and the ability to govern in harmony with both people and the natural order. The idea carried profound implications. A king's power was no longer simply a reflection of ancestral lineage or military might. It became conditional, a delicate balance between responsibility and moral conduct. A ruler who failed to care for the people, who governed with cruelty or negligence, could be seen as having lost the mandate. This was not merely theoretical. It was a practical mechanism that provided justification for rebellion, reform, and the rise of new dynasties. In the quiet of night, one can imagine listeners contemplating this, that the fall of a kingdom may be less a matter of armies and more a matter of virtue, patience, and ethical oversight. The mandate of heaven blended seamlessly with the rituals and symbols inherited from the Shang. Ceremonies, sacrifices, and observances were not only acts of devotion. They were tests of a ruler's moral alignment with cosmic order. Bronze vessels, inscriptions, and offerings became tools through which kings demonstrated care, responsibility, and reverence. Success or failure in these acts reflected on the ruler's legitimacy. In this sense, governance and spirituality were intertwined. Morality was both a public performance and a deeply internalized guiding principle. For a night listener, this fusion creates a rhythm of thought that is reflective, soothing, and conceptually rich, allowing the mind to wander through the ethics of leadership without tension. Stories and examples of virtuous and flawed rulers reinforced this understanding. Kings who were just, attentive, and benevolent were celebrated and remembered. Those who abused their power or neglected duties faced decline and defeat. Chroniclers framed the Zhou's rise and the Shang's fall in these terms, emphasizing that cosmic and moral balance dictated the arc of history. In the quiet imagination, one can feel the weight of this principle, that rulership is a contract, maintained only through conscientious action, wisdom, and alignment with greater forces beyond human control. The moral dimension of kingship extended beyond the palace walls. Officials, advisors, and regional lords were expected to act in accordance with the same ethical framework. Their actions were a reflection of the ruler's virtue and a reinforcement of societal stability. Communities were thus bound not only by laws or coercion, but by a shared understanding of moral responsibility. The mandate of heaven created a subtle but pervasive cultural rhythm. Rulers, subjects, and the cosmos engaged in an ongoing dialogue of trust, attention, and accountability. Listeners lying in the quiet night can almost hear this rhythm, a gentle cadence that resonates with reflection and continuity. This principle also allowed for flexibility in governance. Natural disasters, famine, or social unrest could be interpreted as signals that the mandate had shifted. Kings and dynasties were expected to respond with corrective action, reforms, and care for their people. If they failed, their legitimacy waned, creating moral justification for new leadership. This system, in essence, tied cosmic and human order together, framing political change as a natural, ethical process rather than a random upheaval. For the listener, it introduces a sense of calm inevitability, that societies evolve not only through conflict, but through reflection, virtue, and alignment with enduring principles. The mandate of heaven also shaped how future dynasties understood and justified their rule. Every subsequent emperor, from the Qin to the Han and beyond, would invoke this concept to legitimize authority. It became a lens through which Chinese history was interpreted, a philosophical framework explaining why some dynasties flourished while others faltered. The idea of moral kingship encouraged rulers to govern thoughtfully, to value ethical conduct, and to consider the welfare of their subjects. In this way, A simple principle introduced during the Zhou era carried profound consequences across centuries. Even in everyday life, the mandate of heaven had an echo. Farmers, artisans, and villagers understood that the prosperity of their communities was intertwined with the virtue of leadership. Festivals, rituals, and communal observances were not mere routine. They reinforced a shared understanding that moral alignment sustains order. Respect for ancestors, attention to seasonal cycles, and careful observance of ceremonial practices were all subtly connected to the moral framework that governed kings and commoners alike. For night listeners, this creates an immersive sense of interconnectedness between ruler and ruled, humanity and cosmos, past and present. By the end of this section, the mandate of heaven emerges as both a philosophical and practical principle. It is at once gentle and profound, offering guidance, accountability, and moral clarity. The Zhou dynasty, through this idea, transcended simple conquest or authority. It established a vision of leadership in which ethics, ritual, and governance were inseparable. For the listener drifting toward sleep, the concept resonates softly. Power carries responsibility, virtue sustains continuity, and the moral arc of leadership shapes the destiny of civilizations. In reflecting on the mandate of heaven, we see a society that understood the fragility of authority and the enduring importance of virtue. Rulers are not merely kings of land and armies, but stewards of cosmic and human harmony. Their legitimacy depends on careful attention, thoughtful governance, and ethical conduct. As the Zhou established this principle, they created a legacy that would echo through millennia, defining what it means to rule wisely, justly, and in alignment with forces greater than oneself. The mandate of heaven is not just a political tool. It is a meditation on responsibility, continuity, and ethical living. For the quiet night listener, it provides both fascination and calm. It offers a framework for understanding history, leadership, and the delicate balance that sustains society, creating a soft, reflective space in which to imagine the rise and fall of kingdoms and the enduring power of virtue across time. As the Western Zhou dynasty's influence began to wane, the vast landscapes of China became a mosaic of semi-independent states. The Zhou kings still held nominal authority, but their power was increasingly ceremonial. Local lords, once loyal administrators of distant territories, began to exercise more autonomy, managing armies, lands, and courts with little interference from the distant capital. It was a slow, measured transition, a gradual redistribution of power that would quietly reshape the political landscape over centuries. For the night listener, this shift is less a sudden upheaval than a gentle unfolding, a river of history meandering through fields, forests, and villages, carrying the seeds of change beneath a calm surface. The spring and autumn period, named after the annals that chronicled its events, is often associated with both turmoil and cultural flourishing. Yet this era should be imagined not as chaos, but as subtle evolution. Small states rose in prominence, each navigating a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and kinship obligations. Diplomatic marriages, trade arrangements, and ceremonial exchanges punctuated the political rhythms, alongside occasional military skirmishes. Life continued, guided by seasonal cycles, agricultural rhythms, and ancestral observances. For listeners in the quiet of night, the period's intrigue is revealed not in clashing armies, but in the slow, deliberate movements of strategy, negotiation, and governance. Military development became increasingly important, yet it unfolded with measured attention. Armies were organized, trained, and equipped for conflicts that often involved limited territories rather than total conquest. Bronze weapons, chariots, and disciplined formations reflected the technological sophistication inherited from earlier dynasties, while leaders carefully weighed when to engage in battle and when to seek compromise. Even in times of skirmish, the violence was framed within social codes and moral expectations, reminding participants that warfare was not chaos but a calculated exercise in sustaining influence, protecting resources, and preserving order. The listener can imagine armies moving silently through forests and plains, banners swaying in the wind, commanders weighing each decision in the shadow of both strategy and morality. Alliances shifted like the currents of a river. States that were friendly one season could become rivals the next, depending on marriages, trade, or territorial disputes. Diplomacy was an art, requiring patience, foresight, and the subtle reading of intentions. Envoys traveled with messages of peace or caution, their words measured and deliberate. In quiet moments, villages observed festivals and rituals, unaware of the slow recalibration of political power occurring just beyond the horizon. For the listener, the period feels less like instability and more like a careful dance, a world in which humans negotiate, adapt, and respond to circumstance with calculated, calm attentiveness. The period's cultural and intellectual life continued to flourish even amidst these political adjustments. Rituals, ancestral worship, and ceremonial practices persisted across states, maintaining continuity with the Zhou's earlier moral and spiritual frameworks. Bronze vessels remained central to ceremonies. Inscriptions recorded lineage and accomplishments, and music and poetry punctuated communal gatherings. These cultural anchors provided stability and identity even as political authority diffused. For night listeners, this juxtaposition creates a gentle sense of continuity. Society evolves, yet the heartbeat of tradition sustains rhythm and calm. One remarkable aspect of the spring and autumn period is how small states experimented with governance. Lords implemented local reforms, established schools for administrative training, and codified rules for conduct within their territories. While central Zhou authority weakened, innovation flourished at the peripheries. Legal codes, ritual practices, and agricultural improvements spread quietly, gradually shaping the foundations of administrative sophistication that would influence later dynasties. The listener can visualize scholars studying inscriptions, farmers tending experimental fields, and administrators navigating complex social hierarchies, each contributing incrementally to the slow evolution of civilization. The rhythm of daily life maintained a calming consistency despite political shifts. Farmers sowed, harvested, and prepared for seasonal cycles. Artisans continued their work with bronze, jade, and pottery, and villagers participated in local ceremonies honoring ancestors and deities. Even as states maneuvered for advantage, these routines provided continuity, reinforcing social cohesion and preserving the familiar patterns of life. For the late-night listener, this creates a layered experience, a sense of motion and change gently unfolding over a foundation of enduring human rhythms. Conflict, when it arose, was often contained and strategic. Skirmishes were carefully planned, sometimes used to test alliances, assert influence, or protect borders. Leaders recognized that excessive violence could destabilize trade, disrupt agriculture, and erode the moral legitimacy they increasingly valued. Warfare in this period was both practical and symbolic, a demonstration of authority conducted within limits. For someone imagining these events quietly, it is less terrifying than mesmerizing, a civilization learning to balance ambition, ethics, and strategy over generations. The period also saw subtle shifts in philosophy and thought, laying the groundwork for China's later intellectual flowering. The observation of human behavior, ethical governance, and the consequences of action became more deliberate. Scholars and thinkers began to explore morality, leadership, and social responsibility in ways that were practical yet contemplative. While these developments did not immediately dominate everyday life, their seeds were planted in courtly discussions, ritual interpretations, and the careful management of alliances. Listeners can imagine quiet debates in candlelit halls, officials reflecting on right action, and the soft accumulation of ideas that would blossom in subsequent centuries. Throughout this era, the notion of moral authority persisted, evolving alongside political structures. Kings and lords were expected to act justly, not merely to wield power. The mandate of heaven remained a guiding principle, even as its interpretation adapted to decentralized conditions. Ethical conduct, ritual propriety, and the maintenance of harmony were central to legitimacy, reinforcing the idea that authority is earned and maintained through care, wisdom, and attention to consequence. For a night listener, this principle creates a reflective calm, a society in motion, yet gently tethered to enduring ideals. By the end of this section, the spring and autumn period emerges not as chaos, but as a subtle evolution, a time when power diffused, small states experimented, and human ambition unfolded gradually across landscapes of rivers, plains, and hills. Alliances, warfare, and diplomacy all played out in measured rhythms, while cultural and moral continuity maintained social cohesion. The listener can feel the quiet momentum of history, a steady progression that bridges the Western Zhou's stability and the later intensity of the warring states, creating a gentle anticipation for the transformations yet to come. In this slow, unfolding era, one senses the delicate interplay of ambition and ethics, strategy and morality, innovation and tradition. The spring and autumn period is a world where change emerges subtly, woven into daily life, ritual practice, and human reflection. It is a time of gentle transformation, where the golden age of Zhou gradually gives way to a more dynamic and fragmented landscape, yet retains enough continuity to provide comfort, fascination, and soft contemplation for those listening in the still of night. As the spring and autumn period faded into memory, the landscape of China entered a new phase, one of both complexity and quiet intensity. The Zhou king's influence had eroded almost completely, leaving a vast patchwork of independent states. 7 powers emerged from this mosaic, each vying for influence, prestige, and survival. They were Qin, Chu, Qi, Yan, Zhao, Wei, and Han. For the night listener, it is less a story of chaos and more a meditation on the delicate balance of ambition, strategy, and the slow dance of history as power becomes concentrated, divided, and contested across a continent. Qin, located in the western reaches, was distant from the traditional centers of Chinese civilization, yet it thrived through discipline, military innovation, and careful governance. Its rulers emphasized organization, law, and efficiency, laying the groundwork for future unification. Far from the lush river valleys, Qin's landscape demanded resilience and planning. Rivers, mountains, and plateaus shaped both the people and their ambitions, fostering a state capable of methodical expansion. Imagining Qin at night, one can sense a quiet determination, the measured pacing of armies, the meticulous attention of administrators, and the patient strategies that would eventually propel this western state to dominance. Chu, in the south, contrasted sharply with Qin. Its lands were vast, fertile, and culturally rich. The state's rulers combined military might with a deep appreciation for ceremony, music, and the arts. Chu projected influence through both power and cultural sophistication, creating a civilization that was as expressive as it was strategic. Its borderlands, crisscrossed by rivers and forests, offered both opportunity and challenge, shaping the strategies of generals and the daily lives of villagers. In the quiet reflection of night, Chu represents a state in which creativity and ambition coexist, where the rhythms of culture and governance flow side by side, forming a unique and enduring identity. Qi, to the east, was a center of commerce and innovation. Its leaders leveraged wealth, trade networks, and skilled artisans to maintain influence. The state's strategic position along the coast allowed it to benefit from maritime resources, while inland trade routes connected Qi to other powers. Qi's sophistication lay not only in its material wealth, but also in its ability to adapt diplomatically, observing rivals, forging alliances, and subtly manipulating the balance of power. For the listener, Qi's presence evokes a sense of calculated intelligence, a civilization attuned to both opportunity and consequence, moving deliberately along the currents of ambition and geography. Yan, in the far north, occupied lands less densely populated but no less significant. Its rulers contended with both the environment and neighboring states, emphasizing vigilance, defense, and mobility. The northern frontier demanded flexibility and foresight. While less culturally centralized than Chu or Qi, Yan's resilience and strategic positioning allowed it to participate meaningfully in the slow chessboard of regional power. Imagining Yan at night conjures the quiet tension of borderlands, watchtowers silhouetted against the horizon, the steady rhythm of centuries, and the calm, deliberate attention required to maintain a fragile balance of safety and influence. Zhao, Wei, and Han occupied central territories, acting as both buffers and conduits among the larger states. Zhao, positioned along northern plains, developed strong cavalry and fortifications to navigate the shifting alliances and skirmishes. Wei, centrally located, balanced diplomacy with military readiness, often mediating conflicts and leveraging geography to maintain relevance. Han, smaller than some neighbors, relied on careful political maneuvering, aligning with stronger powers when necessary and retreating strategically when required. Together, these states formed the intricate lattice through which ambition, strategy, and culture flowed, creating a dynamic, interconnected landscape in which the fate of millions was shaped by both subtle and overt acts of governance. Although rivalries existed, much of this period's tension was methodical rather than chaotic. Each state calculated moves carefully, weighing alliances, military strength, and economic potential. Skirmishes were deliberate, campaigns strategically planned, and diplomacy as important as swords and arrows. This careful balancing created an almost hypnotic rhythm. Victories and defeats unfolded over decades, alliances shifted slowly, and populations adjusted to new rulers and borders with remarkable adaptability. Listeners lying quietly in the dark can imagine this chessboard of ambition stretching across rivers, plains, and mountains, each piece moving with intent, yet never in reckless haste. Trade, culture, and diplomacy intertwined with these strategic considerations. Markets connected states, allowing resources, ideas, and artisans to travel long distances. Rituals and ceremonies maintained social cohesion and moral legitimacy, even as local lords pursued their own agendas. Cultural innovations, from poetry to bronze craftsmanship, flowed across borders, creating subtle connections that persisted despite political fragmentation. For the listener, these layers provide both fascination and calm, a civilization in motion, yet governed by patterns and principles that lend coherence to the unfolding drama. Geography remained a central influence on strategy and culture. Rivers guided trade and armies, mountains dictated defensive positions, and plains offered both opportunity and vulnerability. The terrain shaped not only the movements of armies but also the rhythms of daily life. Farmers, merchants, and artisans all adapted to their environments, contributing to a dynamic, responsive society. In the quiet of night, imagining these landscapes helps listeners understand how ambition and circumstance intertwined, producing a civilization that was both resilient and adaptable. Throughout the Warring States period, rulers increasingly embraced administrative innovation. Law, taxation, infrastructure, and centralized governance became more sophisticated, particularly in Qin, which would later emerge as the dominant force. Yet even in states that did not dominate militarily, careful governance, diplomacy, and cultural achievement created a sense of stability and continuity. Listeners can sense the deliberate pacing of human effort, the slow accumulation of power, the thoughtful observation of rivals, and the steady refinement of governance across generations. By the end of this section, the listener is immersed in a China divided yet interconnected, a civilization balanced on the careful interplay of ambition, strategy, and circumstance. The seven powers, Qin, Chu, Qi, Yin, Zhao, Wei, and Han, form a living mosaic, each state contributing to the rhythm of history. The story is not of sudden upheaval, but of subtle, deliberate shifts, where ambition and patience intertwine. The mind can wander across borders, rivers, and cities, following armies, envoys, and rulers in their quiet, calculated movements, experiencing the tension and anticipation of a civilization on the brink of unification. In this meditative vision of the warring states, one sees that even amidst rivalry and fragmentation, continuity and culture endure. Ritual, philosophy, and administration persist alongside ambition and strategy. The listener is left with a sense of calm fascination, a civilization divided, yet structured, restless, yet ordered, tense, yet measured. The chessboard of ambition stretches across the landscape, and history moves quietly forward, preparing the way for the eventual unification of China. In the warring states, necessity became a quiet but relentless teacher. The pressures of divided lands, competing armies, and shifting alliances demanded solutions, and human ingenuity responded in subtle yet profound ways. Iron began to replace bronze, slowly transforming agriculture, tools, and weapons. Farmers could till harder soils with greater ease, producing surplus crops that supported growing populations and armies. Blacksmiths shaped iron with careful hands, crafting plows and blades that increased efficiency, while also providing the military with weapons capable of greater durability and reach. Even in the hush of night, one can imagine the rhythmic clang of the forge, the sparks leaping gently into the dark, shaping not only metal but the trajectory of civilization itself. Military innovation extended beyond material improvements. Crossbows emerged as a quiet revolution in warfare, enabling soldiers to strike with precision and power at a distance. Armies became more disciplined, organized, and strategic, capable of coordinated maneuvers across challenging terrain. Campaigns were planned with meticulous attention to logistics, timing, and intelligence. Generals and advisors observed rivers, hills, and passes, anticipating opportunities and vulnerabilities. The innovations of war were not violent for spectacle, but practical, measured, and transformative, altering the way conflicts unfolded and how states projected authority across borders. At the same time, bureaucratic structures evolved to meet the demands of increasingly complex societies. Officials, appointed based on skill and merit rather than solely on inheritance, administered territories, collected taxes, and maintained records. Writing systems were employed not only for ritual but for governance, ensuring communication across vast lands and between diverse populations. The state became an organism of careful planning and organization, each department attending to its role in the larger system. For the listener lying quietly in the night, this creates a sense of subtle order, a civilization refining itself slowly, methodically, and purposefully. Diplomacy also transformed. Alliances, marriages, and negotiations became as vital as military strength. Envoys carried messages across states, observing etiquette, reading intentions, and leveraging information to influence decisions. Spies gathered intelligence, and strategists advised rulers on both visible and unseen consequences of their actions. This era cultivated a culture of observation, analysis, and foresight, emphasizing thoughtfulness over impulse. Listeners can imagine the quiet corridors of palaces, maps spread on tables, advisors whispering insights, all moving like soft currents that shape the outcome of events without spectacle or noise. Society itself adapted to these changes. Education for administrators became more structured, cultivating literacy, numerical skill, and strategic thinking. Farmers and artisans benefited from improved tools, leading to greater productivity and social stability. Urban centers expanded subtly, markets connected communities, and trade flourished despite ongoing rivalries. Innovations in iron, agriculture, and bureaucracy were not isolated technical changes. They reshaped the rhythms of daily life, embedding efficiency and foresight into the very fabric of civilization. For night listeners, this layering of innovation and human activity forms a meditative tableau where progress emerges naturally from necessity. Reforms introduced by visionary rulers quietly altered the balance of society. Legalist thinkers, observing the imperfections of human nature, advocated strict codes, merit-based appointments, and disciplined enforcement of laws. Other philosophers emphasized ethics, ritual, and moral responsibility, offering complementary guidance to governance. These ideas were debated in courts and halls, in hushed conversations and writings that circulated among scholars and officials. In imagining this intellectual ferment, the listener perceives the invisible machinery of progress, thought shaping practice, theory guiding action, and reflection refining society over decades and centuries. Iron and crossbows, bureaucracies and reforms, strategy and philosophy. all converged to create a society increasingly capable of managing complexity. The warring states were not chaotic for the sake of drama. They were laboratories of human innovation, testing how ambition, conflict, and necessity could propel civilization forward. Every tool, every law, every diplomatic exchange contributed to an unseen scaffolding that supported future unification. Even the seemingly mundane, plowing fields, maintaining records, preparing armies, was transformed by these innovations into threads in the larger tapestry of history. The subtle rhythm of progress during this period is particularly hypnotic. One can imagine the flow of human energy across landscapes, farmers plowing enriched fields with iron-tipped tools, blacksmiths shaping crossbows, scribes recording orders, generals surveying terrain, and envoys traveling quiet roads to negotiate alliances. Each action is purposeful, interdependent, and measured, creating a sense of calm momentum. History advances here not as a storm, but as a tide, slow yet unstoppable, reshaping human society gently but decisively. Even culture adapted in tandem with technological and administrative innovation. Artisans experimented with bronze and iron, while literature and philosophy recorded both achievements and cautionary tales. Rituals persisted, maintaining continuity with past dynasties and reinforcing moral and social cohesion. Music, poetry, and ceremony continued to flow through towns and palaces, offering both aesthetic pleasure and subtle reinforcement of ethical and political order. For the night listener, these cultural threads add a soft, immersive texture to the narrative, balancing intellectual curiosity with calm contemplation. By the end of this section, the listener understands that the warring states were a crucible of transformation. Necessity, arising from competition, conflict, and ambition, fueled innovation across multiple domains. Iron and crossbows reshaped agriculture and warfare. Bureaucracies structured governance and society. Legal and philosophical reforms refined authority and morality. The era illustrates how pressure can lead to refinement and how a civilization, even amidst rivalry, evolves methodically, embedding progress into daily life and governance. In this quiet contemplation, one appreciates the warring states not as a period of unrelenting chaos, but as an era of human ingenuity and adaptive resilience. It is a time when ambition, thought, and necessity converge to create lasting innovations. For listeners drifting toward sleep, the narrative is soothing yet engaging. The flow of history, the interplay of human ingenuity, and the gentle rhythm of progress across landscapes, cities, and fields form a tapestry that is both intellectually stimulating and meditative, preparing the mind for the eventual unification that lies just beyond the horizon. Among the 7 contending states of the Warring States period, one power quietly began to distinguish itself. Far to the west, in the rugged lands of Qin, a society both disciplined and pragmatic was taking shape. Unlike the more culturally lavish states of the East or the expansive southern kingdoms, Qin relied on structure, law, and efficiency. Its people, molded by geography and governance, moved through their days with quiet purpose, aware that survival and prosperity required both obedience and adaptability. In the hush of night, one can imagine the disciplined rhythm of Qin life, the subtle hum of activity that would later propel it toward dominance. Central to Qin's rise was the vision of Xiangyang, a statesman and reformer whose ideas reshaped the very framework of the state. Xiangyang introduced a series of reforms that emphasized merit, order, and legal consistency. Positions were awarded based on ability rather than birth, creating a bureaucratic system that valued competence over tradition. Laws were codified and applied uniformly, reinforcing discipline and predictability. These reforms were not enacted with fanfare or spectacle, but with deliberate, methodical attention to detail, quietly transforming Qin into a state capable of coordinated action far beyond the capabilities of its rivals. Agriculture, too, was revolutionized under Xiangyang's guidance. Fields were measured and organized for maximum efficiency. Farmers were encouraged and rewarded based on productivity, and surplus crops allowed the state to maintain larger, better-equipped armies. Irrigation, land management, and the careful allocation of resources created stability, even in the face of periodic droughts or conflict. For the listener lying quietly in the night, one can sense the calm intelligence behind these policies, the quiet planning and thoughtful foresight that prepared Qin to endure and to expand. Military innovation was central to Qin's eventual dominance. Soldiers were trained systematically, drilled with precision, and equipped with the latest iron weapons and crossbows. The state emphasized logistics, strategy, and discipline, understanding that armies, like agriculture and administration, function best when organized with care and consistency. Battles were not chaotic affairs, but carefully orchestrated movements across the rugged terrain of western China. The army became both a tool of defense and an instrument of expansion, capable of asserting Qin's influence across borders while maintaining internal stability. Qin's society, while rigid, was also remarkably adaptive. Legalist principles ensured compliance, yet the system rewarded loyalty, diligence, and achievement. Citizens and officials alike understood that their actions mattered and that merit and effort could elevate one's status. The state's organization extended to every aspect of life, from village administration to military campaigns, creating a harmonious rhythm of expectation and accomplishment. For the night listener, this is a soothing pattern. Order maintained not through fear alone, but through a structured, comprehensible, and fair system. The political landscape of the warring states provided Qin both opportunity and challenge. Its neighbors were powerful, experienced, and often unpredictable. Yet Qin's methodical approach allowed it to exploit weaknesses quietly. Diplomacy, intelligence gathering, and strategic alliances were employed with patience and precision. Unlike states that relied on size, wealth, or spectacle, Qin moved incrementally, building strength internally while observing and testing rivals externally. It was a slow, deliberate accumulation of power that, over decades, positioned Qin to dominate the chessboard of the warring states. Cultural adaptation played a subtle role in Qin's ascent. While the state was less focused on literary or artistic flourish compared to eastern or southern states, it cultivated a shared identity rooted in law, discipline, and collective purpose. Rituals and ceremonies persisted, reinforcing social cohesion and loyalty to the state. Even the smallest villages recognized the authority of central governance, internalizing the principles of order and responsibility that shaped daily life. The quiet integration of culture and policy created a society both resilient and efficient, capable of sustaining prolonged campaigns and administrative challenges. The impact of Shang Yang's reforms rippled through generations. Merit-based appointments encouraged innovation, productivity, and strategic thinking. Legal uniformity minimized internal conflict and enhanced predictability. Agriculture, bureaucracy, and military organization were interlinked, forming a network of interdependent systems that supported growth and stability. Listeners in the still of night can imagine this network as a subtle web, connecting farmers, soldiers, officials, and rulers into a single, quietly coordinated organism, prepared to act decisively when opportunity arose. Geography also contributed to Qin's rise. Located on the western edge of the Central Plains, Qin was shielded by mountains and rivers, providing natural defenses and time to consolidate resources. Its location fostered resilience, self-reliance, and careful planning, while also encouraging the development of robust infrastructure and communication networks. The landscape itself became a teacher, shaping strategy, guiding settlement, and influencing the rhythms of daily life. In the mind's eye, one can trace rivers winding through valleys, roads stretching across plateaus, and armies moving with precision across challenging terrain, all reinforcing the calm, deliberate growth of Qin. By the end of this section, the listener understands that Qin's ascent was neither sudden nor reliant on raw strength alone. It was a combination of disciplined governance, legalist reforms, agricultural efficiency, military innovation, and strategic foresight. The state's internal coherence allowed it to endure challenges, adapt to shifting circumstances, and gradually outmaneuver its rivals. What seemed at first a quiet, peripheral power became the dominant force, prepared to unify a fractured civilization. In reflecting on Qin's rise, one senses both the subtlety and inevitability of history. Ambition, structure, and innovation converge to shape outcomes, even when immediate circumstances suggest otherwise. For the night listener, the story is both calming and engaging, a measured accumulation of strength, a society functioning as a single, coordinated organism, and a civilization quietly preparing for the transformative moment of unification. Through Qin, we see how deliberate planning, disciplined effort, and moral clarity can enable one state to rise above many, setting the stage for the creation of a unified China and the dawn of a new era. In the heart of China, a man arose whose vision would transform a fragmented land into a single, unified empire. Known to history as Qin Shi Huang, he became the first emperor, a figure whose ambition, intelligence, and relentless drive left a mark that endures to this day. Born into the state of Qin during the turmoil of the warring states, he inherited a realm shaped by discipline, legalist reforms, and strategic foresight. From these foundations, he embarked on a path that would alter not just the political map, but the very fabric of society. In the quiet of night, one can imagine him as a young prince, observing the intricate machinery of governance, sensing the vast potential of his inheritance, and beginning to imagine the unification of a land divided by centuries of rivalry. Qin Shi Huang's personality was complex, at once visionary and exacting, calculating and bold. He demanded absolute obedience, yet inspired dedication through the promise of order and stability. Those who knew him, or who have come to know him through the careful records of history, describe a man of extraordinary focus, capable of contemplating both the minutiae of governance and the grand sweep of destiny. He understood that unification would require more than conquest. It would require cultural, administrative, and ideological cohesion. His mind, even in quiet reflection, seemed to operate on multiple planes: strategy, law, diplomacy, and the subtle rhythms of human behavior. For the night listener, this creates a figure who is simultaneously formidable and fascinating, whose drive can be admired even in calm meditation. One of his first achievements was the formal unification of the warring states. Through a combination of military prowess, strategic alliances, and careful diplomacy, Qin Shi Huang subdued rival powers one by one. His armies, disciplined and equipped with iron weapons and crossbows, moved with precision across the landscapes of northern plains, river valleys, and rugged hills. Cities were captured, fortifications dismantled, and administrative networks extended to incorporate newly conquered territories. Yet even in these campaigns, his approach was methodical rather than chaotic, guided by planning, foresight, and attention to detail. The listener can imagine the quiet tension of the battlefield, the rhythm of marches, and the calm inevitability of Qin's advance. Unification extended beyond military conquest. Qin Shi Huang implemented sweeping reforms to consolidate power and create cohesion across the newly unified empire. Standardized weights, measures, and currency facilitated trade and communication, connecting distant provinces under a single economic framework. The written script was unified, allowing laws, decrees, and cultural texts to be read and understood consistently across regions. Roads and canals were expanded, linking cities and towns, and enabling more efficient governance. These reforms were subtle yet transformative, creating the invisible threads that bound the empire together. In the quiet of night, the listener can trace the invisible lines of these systems, imagining merchants, officials, and travelers moving along roads, each step reinforcing the unity of the realm. Legalist principles, which had guided Qin for generations, became the backbone of administration. Qin Shi Huang enforced strict laws with careful oversight, ensuring obedience and reducing internal friction. Merit-based appointments allowed capable officials to rise, while local governance was structured to maintain both accountability and efficiency. Punishments were severe, yet consistent, creating a predictable, ordered society. In the hush of night, one can picture villages, towns, and cities functioning like well-tuned mechanisms, each citizen playing a role in the smooth operation of the empire. The first emperor understood that a lasting unification required not only conquest, but also the creation of stable institutions and reliable governance. Qin Shi Huang also sought to immortalize his authority through grand constructions and symbolic acts. Palaces, fortifications, and monumental projects reflected the scope of his ambition. The Great Wall, begun in earnest under his reign, stretched across mountains and valleys, designed to protect and delineate the empire's boundaries. Roads were laid with precision, connecting far-flung territories, enabling both trade and the movement of troops. Bronze statues, inscriptions, and ceremonial spaces reinforced his presence and vision throughout the empire. Even in quiet contemplation, one can imagine the vast scale of these projects, the meticulous planning, and the human effort woven into the very land itself, creating a sense of awe without chaos. Beyond infrastructure, Qin Shi Huang sought to unify thought, culture, and ideology. Philosophical and intellectual dissent was managed through careful oversight, aligning education, ritual, and governance with state objectives. He valued practical knowledge, engineering, agriculture, military strategy, while suppressing ideas that threatened cohesion. For the night listener, this creates a sense of focused purpose, an empire shaped not only by geography and armies, but by the alignment of minds and ideas, producing a calm yet powerful sense of order. His personal quest for immortality also influenced the empire. Qin Shi Huang commissioned elaborate tombs, guarded by terracotta soldiers, and pursued elixirs and remedies believed to extend life. These projects, while ambitious, reflect the enduring human desire to leave a mark, to create continuity beyond the fleeting span of existence. Even in the quiet, one can sense the tension between mortality and legacy, a theme that resonates with listeners seeking reflection, curiosity, and gentle contemplation. Despite his authoritarian style, Qin Shi Huang's reign represents an extraordinary vision realized. The unification of China under a single rule was not only political, it was structural, economic, and cultural. He created systems that allowed communication, trade, and governance to function across vast distances, leaving a framework that would endure long after his lifetime. For the night listener, this achievement can be appreciated as a pattern of thoughtful, deliberate action, an empire crafted through intelligence, foresight, and persistence rather than sheer force alone. By the end of this section, the listener understands the magnitude of Qin Shi Huang's ambition and achievements. He was a man of contrasts, visionary yet exacting, disciplined yet expansive in imagination. His reforms, unification, and projects demonstrate how determination, planning, and a focus on systems can reshape a civilization. The empire he created was brief, yet its shadows stretched across centuries, influencing governance, culture, and identity long after his passing. In reflecting on Qin Shi Huang, one senses both awe and calm contemplation. He was a ruler who transformed a divided land through strategy, law, and vision, leaving a legacy that continues to echo. For the night listener, his story is hypnotic yet measured, a demonstration of human capability, the subtle accumulation of power, and the quiet orchestration of a civilization into unity. Through this lens, the first emperor is not merely a historical figure, but a meditation on vision, discipline, and the enduring influence of thoughtful action in shaping the destiny of millions. Qin Shi Huang understood that unifying a civilization required more than armies and laws. True cohesion depended on consistency, on shared systems that would connect the farthest corners of his empire. One of the earliest and most profound steps in this direction was standardization. Across mountains, rivers, and plains, measures were unified. Weights, coins, and the units used to measure land all became consistent. Merchants and farmers alike found their trade simplified, their exchanges predictable. For the listener lying in the quiet of night, this may seem a small detail, yet it illustrates a subtle truth. When a society aligns its basic systems, it creates the invisible threads that hold it together, enabling larger, more complex structures to flourish. The written script was another cornerstone of Qin's unification. Previously, characters varied widely across regions, making communication between states cumbersome. By standardizing the script, Qin Shi Huang enabled laws, edicts, and records to be universally understood, fostering a sense of unity and shared identity. Scholars and scribes traveled between provinces, copying texts and guiding local officials, ensuring that the words of the empire resonated the same from distant towns to the capital. For the night listener, it is easy to imagine quiet study rooms illuminated by candlelight, the deliberate stroke of brush on bamboo or silk, each character a link in the chain that connected millions of people across vast distances. Roads and infrastructure became physical manifestations of unity. The empire's engineers extended existing routes and carved new ones, connecting cities, forts, and farmlands. Trade and travel became more predictable, armies could mobilize efficiently, and ideas flowed alongside goods. Villages previously isolated now found themselves linked to distant provinces, creating a network that bound the empire together without visible coercion. In imagining these roads at night, one can picture carts rolling steadily along, envoys traveling with purpose, and travelers moving quietly under starlight, small, deliberate motions that collectively strengthened the empire's cohesion. The Great Wall, begun in earnest under Qin Shi Huang, symbolized both protection and projection of authority. Sections of earlier walls were connected, repaired, and extended across mountains and deserts. The labor required was immense, yet the purpose was clear: to delineate the empire, protect borders, and assert presence. While the construction demanded human effort and organization, it also served as a visual reminder of Qin's reach and discipline. In the quiet contemplation of night, one can imagine the wall stretching over ridges and valleys, watchtowers standing in silent vigilance, and soldiers patrolling with quiet determination, a testament to the empire's capacity to shape both landscape and society. Bridges and canals complemented the roads and walls, improving the flow of goods, water, and people. Rivers that once constrained movement became channels of connection, facilitating agriculture, commerce, and communication. Farmers could transport produce more efficiently, and officials could reach distant regions with speed. This practical transformation of the environment reflected Qin Shi Huang's understanding that small, consistent changes, standardized roads, uniform measurements, and systematic waterways could have monumental effects over time. For the night listener, it becomes a meditation on the quiet power of infrastructure, how seemingly mundane details ripple outward, shaping societies, economies, and daily life. Even architecture and urban planning reflected standardization. Palaces, administrative centers, and military outposts were designed according to consistent principles, ensuring uniformity and predictability. Citizens moving between towns or provinces would encounter familiar layouts, reinforcing a sense of belonging to a single, coherent state. Buildings were constructed not only for function, but to symbolize stability and authority, quietly communicating the order that underpinned Qin rule. One can imagine walking through streets built with precision, each stone, gate, and tower a testament to careful planning and long-term vision. These monumental projects extended beyond practical concerns to symbolic and psychological effects. By standardizing scripts, weights, roads, and even measurements of time, Qin Shi Huang created a perception of order and inevitability. Citizens, officials, and even neighboring states recognized that the empire was organized, disciplined, and enduring. In the quiet of night, one can sense how these systems acted like threads, weaving individuals and communities into a unified whole. Each small, standardized element, from the weight of a coin to the layout of a street, served as both tool and message, silently reinforcing the strength and stability of Qin rule. The labor behind these projects was immense, yet it operated as part of a rhythm that defined the empire. Soldiers, artisans, and farmers contributed to construction and maintenance, their efforts coordinated through meticulous planning. Roads, walls, and canals were not built in haste, but with methodical attention to detail, creating enduring structures that would outlast individual lives. The night listener can imagine the quiet diligence of these workers, hands shaping stone, carving wood, pouring mortar, each act a link in the vast chain of Qin civilization, a demonstration of collective discipline that mirrors the order the empire sought to impose. Standardization and monumental projects also enabled the central government to maintain control over distant territories. Governors and officials operated with clear guidelines, understanding their roles and responsibilities. Resources could be allocated efficiently, armies mobilized quickly, and communications maintained across hundreds of miles. These systems reduced uncertainty, enhanced stability, and allowed the empire to function as a coordinated organism rather than a loose collection of provinces. For the listener, it is a calming meditation on structure and foresight, a civilization aligning itself at both human and systemic levels, quietly preparing for the endurance of centuries. By the end of this section, the listener understands that Qin Shi Huang's legacy was built not only through conquest, but through the careful shaping of society itself. The Great Wall, standardized scripts, weights, measures, roads, and canals were not merely practical innovations. They were instruments of cohesion, connecting people, ideas, and lands. The empire's influence extended far beyond immediate administration, embedding systems that would guide China for generations. In the hush of night, the listener can reflect on how small, deliberate changes ripple outward, transforming landscapes, societies, and the course of history. The quiet power of Qin Shi Huang's projects reminds us that monumental outcomes often arise from consistent, seemingly small actions. The empire's coherence, resilience, and longevity were built on foundations of meticulous planning and standardization. For those listening in the stillness of night, this narrative is both calming and intellectually satisfying, a meditation on how structure, foresight, and attention to detail can unify a civilization, leaving a legacy that stretches far beyond the ruler's lifetime. Even the mightiest empires are not immune to the quiet erosion of time and circumstance. Qin, forged through discipline, strategy, and vision, ultimately faced challenges that no law, road, or wall could fully contain. The death of Qin Shi Huang created a vacuum that few could fill. Succession disputes quietly fractured the authority he had painstakingly established, as advisors, officials, and ambitious nobles maneuvered in shadows, each seeking to shape the empire in their own image. For the night listener, this is not a story of chaos, but a meditation on fragility, how a system, no matter how well-ordered, depends on the steady hand of leadership. Revolts began in distant provinces, sparked by decades of harsh labor, strict laws, and the burdens of monumental projects. While these initiatives had strengthened the empire, they also left a trail of fatigue and resentment. Farmers and laborers, soldiers and craftsmen, all bore the weight of the empire's ambitions. In quiet towns and villages, murmurs of discontent gradually swelled into organized resistance. These uprisings were neither sudden nor spectacular. They unfolded with the measured pace of history itself, a gentle yet persistent reminder that even the most disciplined societies are subject to human limits. The speed of Qin's collapse surprised many. Provinces that had been integrated through law, standardization, and infrastructure slowly slipped from central control. Governors acted in their own interest, local leaders asserted independence, and communication lines, once reliable, faltered under the strain of rebellion. Armies that had marched with precision now faced scattered opponents who knew the terrain intimately. The empire's strength, once a network of interconnected systems, began to unravel quietly, revealing vulnerabilities that had been invisible during the first emperor's lifetime. Amid this turbulence, succession struggles exacerbated instability. The young and inexperienced ruler who followed Qin Shi Huang lacked both the authority and the vision to maintain control. Officials and generals vied for influence, shifting alliances and loyalties with quiet calculation. Decisions were made hesitantly or in self-interest, eroding cohesion without the need for dramatic confrontation. For the night listener, these events form a subtle pattern, a system gradually losing its balance, not through sudden catastrophe, but through the slow accumulation of small fractures, each imperceptible on its own, yet together reshaping the empire's trajectory. Even as the dynasty faltered, remnants of Qin's achievements persisted. Roads still connected cities, canals carried water and grain, and standardized measures remained in use. The Great Wall, though incomplete, stood as a testament to the vision of unification. Administrative systems, though under stress, continued to function in pockets, offering glimpses of order amidst the growing disorder. This juxtaposition, the endurance of structure amid human upheaval, provides a calm reflection for the listener, that even in decline, the echoes of planning and foresight continue to shape society. Cultural and philosophical continuity also persisted. Legalist principles, though weakened, had imprinted themselves on governance practices. Scholars, artisans, and citizens carried forward the knowledge, craft, and organizational habits cultivated under Qin. These legacies would not disappear. Instead, they would influence the next chapter of Chinese history. For those listening in the quiet of night, it is a gentle reminder that even as empires fall, ideas, systems, and structures endure, quietly preparing the ground for what comes next. The fall of Qin was remarkably swift, yet it was not chaotic in the cinematic sense. The decline unfolded with the measured cadence of history, marked by small, cumulative pressures rather than sudden catastrophes. Provinces slipped from control, rebels gained ground, and leadership faltered. The empire's vast scale, once a source of strength, now became a challenge. Distances that had been bridged by roads and administration were now stretched by uncertainty and human ambition. The listener can imagine the quiet unfolding of these events. Villages asserting autonomy, officials negotiating loyalties, and armies maneuvering with caution, all moving toward the inevitable conclusion without fanfare or spectacle. By the end of this section, the listener perceives both the fragility and the persistence of human systems. Qin's empire, though short-lived, demonstrated the power of vision, discipline, and structure. Its collapse illustrates that even the most carefully constructed civilization is subject to human limitations, succession challenges, and social pressures. Yet the enduring elements of Qin, its roads, walls, bureaucracy, and ideas, survive as silent guides, shaping the future and preparing the way for a new era. As the warring states give way to unified rule under a different dynasty, the story of Qin serves as a reflective pause, a meditation on ambition, achievement, and the delicate balance between order and human reality. For the night listener, it is a calming transition, offering both closure and anticipation. The empire's rise and fall are understood not as dramatic spectacle, but as a natural rhythm of history, gentle yet inevitable, preparing the mind for the next chapter, the Han Dynasty, where stability, culture, and governance would expand upon the foundations laid by Qin, carrying the legacy of one of the world's first truly unified empires forward into centuries of enduring influence. In the wake of the Qin dynasty's rapid rise and fall, China found itself yearning for stability, a rhythm of governance that could endure beyond the ambitions of a single ruler. From the turbulent chaos of rebellion and revolt, a figure emerged whose story was both extraordinary and relatable. Liu Bang, a commoner born far from the gilded halls of nobility, rose to become the founding emperor of the Han Dynasty. His ascent offers a gentle meditation on the power of perseverance, intelligence, and human ingenuity, a narrative perfectly suited to calm, reflective listening during the night. Liu Bang's early life was unremarkable in the eyes of the powerful. He served as a minor local official, tending to administrative duties, interacting with villagers, and navigating the subtle hierarchies of daily life. Yet within him was an understanding of people, of loyalty, and of timing. He recognized opportunity not through lineage or inherited privilege, but through observation, intuition, and the careful cultivation of allies. In imagining Liu Bang's early days, one can picture quiet village roads, bustling markets, and the unassuming rhythms of work and conversation, a common world quietly preparing him for uncommon destiny. The collapse of Qin created both danger and opportunity. Provinces rebelled, armies scattered, and ambitious leaders sought control of the fragmented empire. Liu Bang moved with a calm, deliberate strategy, balancing patience with decisive action. Rather than rushing into conflict, he built relationships with fellow leaders, earned the loyalty of soldiers, and gained the trust of ordinary people. His approach was subtle yet effective. By understanding human nature, he attracted support while avoiding unnecessary confrontation. For the night listener, this provides a meditative sense of foresight, how measured patience and keen perception can quietly shift the tides of history. As rebellions coalesced into campaigns for power, Liu Bang's abilities as a strategist and leader became apparent. He marshaled troops not through fear or spectacle, but through trust and organization, emphasizing discipline tempered with fairness. He understood that leadership was not merely about winning battles, but about maintaining the morale, loyalty, and well-being of those who served him. Soldiers, aware of his attentiveness and empathy, followed with dedication, creating a cohesion that rivaled armies far larger in number. In the calm imagery of night, one can imagine the quiet encampments, soldiers tending their weapons, and Liu Bang walking among them, earning trust through presence rather than command alone. The unification of China under Liu Bang's banner was not instantaneous, nor was it marked by the sweeping brutality of Qin's campaigns. Rather, it unfolded with measured, deliberate steps, negotiating allegiances, pacifying provinces, and consolidating territories. Cities that had experienced upheaval were gradually reintegrated into a larger system of governance. Roads, canals, and administrative structures, many inherited from Qin, were carefully adapted to support stability. In the quiet of night, one can envision officials restoring order, farmers resuming work, and the gentle rhythms of life returning, each act a brick in the foundation of a new dynasty. Liu Bang's rise illustrates a profound human principle. Extraordinary outcomes often emerge from ordinary beginnings. His story resonates with narrative-driven listeners because it reflects a deep truth about opportunity, resilience, and adaptability. He was not a noble born into privilege, yet his understanding of people and circumstances allowed him to navigate perilous landscapes with quiet effectiveness. For those listening in the stillness of night, this narrative offers both engagement and reassurance that insight, patience, and empathy can shape history as decisively as power or wealth. Upon establishing the Han Dynasty, Liu Bang focused on creating structures that balance central authority with local autonomy. Unlike the rigid legalism of Qin, the Han embraced pragmatism and moderation, combining effective administration with a degree of leniency. Officials were appointed for competence, taxes were measured to avoid overwhelming the populace, and policies were crafted to stabilize society. The listener can imagine provincial towns adjusting to these changes, markets reopening, families resuming daily routines, and governance taking on a rhythm that was firm, yet humane. This was a dynasty built not only on conquest, but on the careful management of human relationships and systems, fostering both loyalty and longevity. Education and culture were subtly encouraged, reflecting Liu Bang's understanding that governance extended beyond law and military might. Scholars were consulted, histories recorded, and rituals maintained to honor both tradition and innovation. The empire's continuity relied not only on administrative systems, but on shared knowledge, ethical guidance, and a sense of cultural identity. In the hush of night, one can imagine quiet study halls, scribes copying texts by lantern light, and communities absorbing the teachings and rituals that reinforced stability and cohesion. Liu Bang's personal qualities, resilience, patience, and pragmatism, were as essential as his structural reforms. He navigated intrigue and rebellion with careful judgment, avoiding impulsive decisions that might fracture his fragile authority. His empathy for ordinary people, combined with an ability to inspire loyalty in both soldiers and officials, created a balance that allowed the new dynasty to take root. For the listener, this human element adds warmth to the story. History shaped not only by laws or armies, but by character, insight, and the subtle art of leadership. By the end of this section, the listener understands that the birth of the Han Dynasty was both political and profoundly human. Liu Bang exemplifies the quiet power of ordinary beginnings, demonstrating that insight, patience, and a deep understanding of people can shape history on a grand scale. His ascent establishes a foundation for the Golden Age to follow, linking ambition with prudence, conquest with consolidation, and governance with empathy. As the night listener drifts gently, the story of Liu Bang offers both engagement and calm reflection. It humanizes Chinese history, showing that empires are not built solely by kings and armies, but by vision, strategy, and the careful orchestration of ordinary lives toward extraordinary ends. The Han Dynasty begins here not with spectacle, but with measured growth, patient consolidation, and the quiet rhythm of a leader who understood both the weight of history and the subtle power of human nature. As the Han Dynasty settled into stability under Liu Bang and his successors, the empire's attention began to stretch beyond its borders. China, vast and varied, was no longer merely a collection of provinces. It was a civilization seeking connection, exchange, and awareness of the wider world. The Silk Road emerged not as a single road, but as a network of pathways across deserts, mountains, and rivers, linking China to distant lands in Central Asia, Persia, and even as far as the Roman Empire. For the night listener, this is a gentle meditation on curiosity, on the invisible threads that carry ideas, goods, and culture across unimaginable distances. Merchants first followed the paths carved by travelers and nomads, small caravans moving slowly through the rugged terrain. Silk, delicate and luminous, became the symbol of China's reach, its threads carrying both material wealth and cultural influence. Alongside silk traveled paper, spices, precious stones, and metals. Yet trade was never only about commodities. It was about stories, beliefs, and knowledge. Maps were exchanged, astronomical observations shared, and artisans learned techniques from distant lands. Each step of a caravan carried not only goods, but also the seeds of ideas, quietly weaving distant civilizations together. The routes were treacherous, yet mesmerizing. Travelers crossed deserts where the sun's glare turned sand into a reflective sea, and night brought a canopy of stars so vast it seemed to stretch to infinity. Mountain passes challenged the strongest horses and the most determined merchants, yet those who traversed them returned with stories, innovations, and treasures that deepened understanding of the wider world. For the listener in the quiet of night, one can imagine camels moving steadily along silent trails, their bells jingling softly, and travelers pausing to rest under the moonlight, exchanging tales and goods with equally weary companions. Beyond material trade, cultural exchange flourished. Buddhist ideas from India gradually reached the empire, subtly influencing art, architecture, and philosophy. Central Asian music, textiles, and artistic motifs found their way into Chinese palaces and temples. Craftsmen adopted techniques from foreign lands, blending them with local methods to create something entirely new. The Silk Road was not merely a channel of commerce, but a corridor of human imagination, curiosity, and creativity. Listeners can close their eyes and sense the faint hum of distant lands merging into the quiet rhythm of Han China, where each innovation, each borrowed idea, became a thread in the empire's rich cultural tapestry. Diplomatic exchanges also traversed these routes. Envoys carried letters, gifts, and proposals, bridging worlds that seemed impossibly distant. Persia, Central Asia, and even the Roman Empire were connected not only through trade, but through subtle negotiations, the exchange of knowledge, and shared curiosity. These contacts, though sparse and slow by modern standards, revealed to the Chinese the vastness of human civilization, the diversity of belief, and the interconnectedness of distant lands. For the night listener, it evokes a sense of wonder, the quiet realization that people across continents were already touching each other's lives in profound ways, long before the speed of modern communication. The landscape itself shaped these connections. Rivers provided routes deeper into Central Asia. Mountains offered natural corridors and challenges that regulated traffic. Deserts taught patience and endurance. Travelers, aware of the dangers, planned meticulously, carrying provisions, water, and protective talismans. Yet the natural barriers did more than hinder. They offered protection for cultural and economic exchange, creating nodes where caravans rested, traders met, and ideas mingled. Imagining these journeys at night, one can picture the soft glow of fires in remote desert oases, the rhythmic footsteps of animals, and the quiet conversations of merchants sharing news, dreams, and knowledge under starlit skies. Ideas traveled as quietly and subtly as silk. Mathematics, astronomy, and medicinal knowledge spread slowly along these paths, carried by scholars and travelers who recognized their value. The influence of Chinese silk and porcelain reached markets far beyond the empire, shaping fashion, taste, and trade across continents. Conversely, new crops, animals, and artistic forms entered China, broadening the empire's understanding of the world. In this gentle exchange, the Han Dynasty expanded its perception of geography, culture, and possibility, demonstrating that curiosity and connection can travel farther than armies or empires alone. The Silk Road was not a single entity but a living network, evolving as needs and knowledge shifted. Caravans would pause for seasons, rivers would dictate detours, and political boundaries would alter the flow of movement. Yet through these changes, the underlying principle remained constant: connection. For the night listener, this offers a comforting rhythm, like the ebb and flow of distant tides. Even when routes shift, currents of exchange, learning, and communication continue, quietly shaping civilizations. Trade hubs emerged at strategic points. Oasis towns where water and shelter were plentiful, mountain passes where travelers rested, and riverside settlements that served as meeting points for cultures. These hubs became microcosms of the wider world, places where languages mingled, cuisines blended, and ideas were shared. One can imagine the bustling yet gentle interactions at these resting points. A merchant from the West explaining the origin of a rare gemstone, a scholar from the East sharing knowledge of local agriculture, a caravan master recounting tales of distant lands. These were quiet but profound moments of connection that, over time, transformed the empire's worldview. By the end of this section, the listener understands that the Han Dynasty was not confined to its borders. Its power, culture, and curiosity extended far beyond its immediate territories. The Silk Road exemplifies how an empire can connect not just people, but ideas, dreams, and knowledge, shaping perceptions of the world and inspiring generations to come. The narrative evokes both wonder and calm reflection, illustrating that distance does not prevent influence, and that human curiosity naturally seeks connection. For the night listener, the Silk Road is both a map and a meditation. It demonstrates how slow, deliberate movement, whether of goods, ideas, or people, can weave distant worlds together. China, under the Han, became a hub of connection, a bridge between East and West, leaving a legacy that would resonate across centuries. The quiet rhythm of camels, traders, and scholars along the vast corridors of mountains, deserts, and rivers is a reminder that civilization grows not only through conquest and law but through curiosity, exchange, and the gentle persistence of human endeavor. Life in the early Han Dynasty moved with a rhythm both familiar and extraordinary. While emperors and officials shaped laws, oversaw construction, and negotiated borders, ordinary people cultivated their fields, studied texts, and observed the world around them. In this quiet balance between governance and daily life, the Han Dynasty cultivated innovations and philosophies that quietly reshaped the very fabric of existence. For the night listener, this is a chance to drift gently into a world where observation, thought, and routine blend seamlessly, creating a sense of calm yet profound human achievement. One of the most enduring contributions of the Han was the development of paper. Simple yet revolutionary, this invention transformed the way knowledge was recorded, shared, and preserved. Scholars and scribes could write with greater ease, spreading ideas across the empire. Letters, administrative records, and literary texts could now move farther and faster, connecting officials and citizens in ways previously impossible. For the listener lying quietly, one can imagine the soft brush on silk or paper, ink flowing steadily, and the careful hands of those recording history, science, and philosophy, all contributing to a calm network of shared understanding that would endure for centuries. Science and observation flourished alongside these practical inventions. Han engineers constructed seismographs to detect distant earthquakes, understanding that the natural world held patterns and rhythms that could be interpreted and anticipated. Astronomers mapped the stars, studied eclipses, and recorded celestial phenomena, linking human life to the vastness of the cosmos. Farmers measured rainfall, tracked seasonal changes, and refined irrigation techniques, quietly ensuring that daily life proceeded smoothly. In the hush of night, listeners can visualize these innovations not as abstract feats, but as intimate, human efforts to understand, predict, and harmonize with the world around them. Philosophy guided both rulers and citizens in subtle, everyday ways. Confucian teachings, emphasizing harmony, duty, and respect, permeated education, governance, and social conduct. Scholars studied the classics under lantern light, contemplating morality, virtue, and proper behavior. Parents and teachers imparted lessons on ethics and responsibility, shaping a society where reflection and learning became natural parts of daily life. For the night listener, the rhythm of study and quiet reflection mirrors the stillness of the evening, a gentle reassurance that human thought can flow steadily alongside daily routines, creating both personal and societal harmony. In villages and towns, life continued with a serene diligence. Farmers plowed fields with oxen, sowing grain according to the rhythms of the seasons. Women tended gardens, prepared meals, and maintained homes, their work essential to the quiet continuity of life. Markets offered produce, textiles, and crafts, with merchants exchanging goods and ideas along familiar paths. Artisans shaped bronze, silk, and wood, their skills honed over generations and contributing to both utility and beauty. The night listener can imagine the soft rustle of wind through crops, the distant lowing of oxen, and the muted conversations of townspeople, all forming a calming symphony of ordinary life. Education and the civil service system offered another layer of daily structure. Young men aspiring to serve the state studied Confucian texts, history, and law, preparing for examinations that could determine their future. Libraries and study halls became quiet centers of knowledge, where thought and reflection were valued as highly as action. For those listening at night, the image of a student under a soft lantern, immersed in study while the world sleeps, creates both intimacy and calm, an understanding that learning itself can be a gentle, steady force shaping society. Even art and leisure reflected this blend of calm, creativity, and contemplation. Poetry, music, and painting flourished in quiet courts and humble homes alike. Landscapes were captured in brush strokes, melodies floated softly across rooms, and poetry reflected on nature, life, and the passage of time. These pursuits were not distractions, but meditative practices that reinforced both cultural identity and inner tranquility. Listeners can imagine these scenes unfolding slowly, a delicate balance between action and observation, thought and expression, each moment contributing to the quiet enrichment of daily life. Health and medicine advanced in practical ways. Herbal remedies, acupuncture, and early medical texts helped people tend to their bodies, while public works such as wells, irrigation systems, and granaries ensured nourishment and stability. Life, while not free from hardship, was guided by knowledge, observation, and preparation. For the night listener, it is reassuring to consider a society where the rhythms of daily life, work, study, reflection, and care were intertwined with innovations that made life more predictable, safe, and harmonious. By the end of this section, the listener understands that the Han Dynasty was more than emperors and conquest. It was a society where innovation, philosophy, and routine blended to create a stable and enduring civilization. From paper that carried ideas across distances to seismographs that measured the Earth's subtle tremors, from Confucian study halls to bustling markets, daily life moved in a gentle cadence, guided by curiosity, observation, and ethical reflection. For the night listener, this is a world both relatable and extraordinary, a reminder that human ingenuity often flourishes quietly, shaping life without spectacle, leaving a legacy that persists not through drama, but through steady, deliberate effort. The innovations, philosophies, and rhythms of the early Han provide a meditative reflection on the power of everyday life, offering calm engagement, subtle curiosity, and the soothing knowledge that society is built not only on empires and wars, but on the continuous, thoughtful acts of ordinary people. After the long stability of the Han dynasty, China entered a period of fragmentation and transformation. The empire, once unified under careful governance, splintered into three major states: Wei in the north, Shu in the southwest, and Wu in the southeast. While this era is often remembered for battles, generals, and conquest, it is equally a time of story, strategy, and the weaving of legend. For the night listener, it is a chance to drift into a world where history and myth merge, where human ambition meets cultural memory, and where the lines between reality and romance flow quietly like a slow river. Wei, the northern state, drew strength from its fertile plains and centralized leadership. Its rulers, military strategists, and advisors focused on organization and discipline, maintaining order across vast stretches of land. Towns and villages adapted to new governance. Markets stabilized under consistent taxation, and communication networks allowed for the coordination of administration and commerce. For the listener imagining these regions at night, one can picture quiet towns under the watch of distant watchtowers, roads linking communities, and officials moving deliberately between provinces, ensuring that life continued even amidst uncertainty. Shu, nestled among mountains and rivers, relied on terrain and natural barriers to protect itself. Its leaders cultivated loyalty and ingenuity, using both geography and strategy to maintain independence. The rivers provided sustenance and routes for trade, while the mountains offered natural defense and a rhythm to daily life that was different from the open plains of Wei. Villagers worked fields along gentle slopes. Artisans shaped wood and bronze in quiet workshops, and scholars preserved the Han tradition of study and reflection. For the night listener, Shu evokes the calm yet resilient strength of a people living in harmony with the landscape, quietly maintaining culture and continuity even amid larger political struggles. Wu, in the southeast, thrived along rivers and coasts, embracing trade, agriculture, and naval strength. Its ports linked the region to both local and distant markets, allowing goods, ideas, and culture to flow freely. The rhythm of rivers and tides influenced daily life. Fishermen rising before dawn, merchants traveling along calm waterways, and families exchanging news and goods in slow, deliberate patterns. In Wu, the natural environment shaped not only commerce, but also art, poetry, and social interaction. For the listener, this region conjures images of tranquil riverbanks, distant sails moving steadily across the water, and communities that thrive quietly, their routines as enduring as the currents themselves. Amid these three kingdoms, legends began to emerge. Stories of cunning generals, loyal advisors, and brilliant strategists circulated in whispered conversations, recorded by scholars, and later immortalized in literature. Figures like Zhuge Liang, Cao Cao, and Sun Quan became symbols not only of military acumen, but of wisdom, loyalty, and human ambition. Yet these tales often blur fact and fiction, creating a tapestry of narrative that is part history, part moral lesson, and part dream. For the night listener, the allure lies not in battles or bloodshed, but in the weaving of these stories, a gentle exploration of human character and choice, set against the backdrop of political change. The cultural legacy of the three kingdoms is perhaps as enduring as any military achievement. Poetry, art, and philosophical reflection thrive despite, or perhaps because of, the division. Scholars compiled histories, chronicling both victories and defeats, while storytellers wove moral lessons into tales of heroism and strategy. Markets, temples, and schools continued to operate, their rhythms offering stability and continuity. The listener can imagine quiet courtyards, scholars copying texts by lantern light, and artisans crafting objects both beautiful and practical, all while the distant world shifted politically around them. Romance and reality intertwined in subtle ways during this period. Battles and strategy existed, certainly, but the stories that endure focus on relationships, decisions, and human ingenuity. Strategic alliances, letters of persuasion, and subtle negotiations often determine the fate of kingdoms as much as swords and spears. Citizens, too, adapted to changing rulers, finding ways to maintain family, work, and culture amid political uncertainty. For the night listener, these details provide gentle immersion, a sense of movement and consequence without the urgency or panic of overt conflict. Despite division, the people of the three kingdoms maintained the rhythm of ordinary life. Farmers sowed and harvested according to seasonal patterns, artisans honed their crafts, and merchants traveled cautiously between regions. Festivals, rituals, and family traditions persisted, grounding communities in continuity and shared experience. While the grand narrative emphasizes kingdoms and generals, the quiet persistence of daily life ensured that culture, knowledge, and society endured. For the listener, it becomes a meditation on resilience, that human life continues subtly and steadily, even amid political upheaval. Travel and communication, though complicated by fragmented rule, continued to foster exchange. Envoys, merchants, and scholars carried news, ideas, and goods across the kingdoms, maintaining connections that would later contribute to the reunification of China. Ideas about governance, agriculture, military strategy, and philosophy flowed along these informal networks, weaving a subtle tapestry of cultural cohesion beneath the apparent division. The night listener can imagine slow journeys through forests, over mountains, and along rivers, where travelers carry both goods and stories, knitting a sense of continuity across a fractured landscape. By the end of this section, the listener appreciates that the Three Kingdoms era is as much about story and human ingenuity as it is about conquest. Wei, Shu, and Wu each contributed to China's enduring cultural, intellectual, and moral heritage. Tales of heroes, advisors, and leaders provide lessons in loyalty, strategy, and foresight, while ordinary life continued quietly, creating the foundation for future stability. For those listening at night, the period offers both gentle engagement and imaginative reflection, a reminder that history can be as much about narrative and human experience as it is about battles and politics. The Three Kingdoms, then, become a landscape of imagination and reflection. Listeners can drift through northern plains, southwestern mountains, and southeastern rivers, experiencing the subtle rhythms of human life, culture, and story. Here, history and legend intermingle, creating a calm yet deeply engaging meditation on leadership, creativity, and human continuity. The narrative does not rush. It meanders like a river, carrying both truth and myth, guiding the listener toward understanding, curiosity, and restfulness. Even amid division, China remained a civilization of continuity. The Three Kingdoms remind us that while borders and rulers may shift, culture, knowledge, and human resilience persist quietly. The listener is invited to follow these subtle currents, imagining lives unfolding in rhythm with the land, society, and stories that endure beyond political turmoil. In this gentle immersion, history becomes both narrative and meditation, allowing curiosity, reflection, and calm to coexist as the listener drifts deeper into the night. After the turbulence of the Three Kingdoms, China entered a period of profound fragmentation and subtle transformation. The north and south of the empire developed along different paths, shaped by migration, geography, and culture. Rivers and mountains created natural boundaries, encouraging regional identities to flourish while maintaining faint threads of connection across the land. For the night listener, this is a gentle meditation on continuity amid division, a time when ideas, faith, and culture carried the promise of unity, even if political borders remained fluid. In the north, waves of migration reshaped society. Families, scholars, artisans, and officials fled southward during periods of unrest, seeking safety and opportunity. Along with them traveled traditions, skills, and knowledge, subtly blending with local customs. Villages and towns absorbed these newcomers, creating communities that were both diverse and harmonious. For the night listener, it is easy to imagine quiet hamlets along riversides, where families shared meals, craftsmen exchanged techniques, and stories of distant homelands were passed on in hushed tones by the fire. Each movement of people contributed to the slow weaving of cultural continuity, like threads of silk merging into a single, intricate fabric. In the south, rivers and fertile lands allowed for stability and gradual growth. Agriculture prospered, markets thrived, and towns developed along navigable waterways. The southern regions, relatively shielded from the immediate chaos of northern conflicts, became centers of learning, craftsmanship, and artistic expression. Scholars preserved the classics of Confucian thought, while local artisans refined ceramics, textiles, and bronze work. For the listener, these communities evoke calm scenes of daily life. Children walking to study halls, merchants setting out wares at dawn, and the gentle ripple of riverboats carrying goods quietly downstream. As North and South evolved separately, ideas became bridges across distance. Buddhism, introduced from India through trade and travel, spread slowly and quietly along these channels. Monks journeyed along rivers, mountains, and caravan routes, carrying sutras and teachings that offered spiritual guidance to communities in need of comfort and continuity. Temples were established, meditation practiced, and art inspired by these ideas began to flourish. For the night listener, one can imagine the soft chanting of monks in serene courtyards, the flicker of lanterns along temple halls, and the tranquil beauty of newly carved statues, each one a quiet testament to the human search for meaning in times of uncertainty. Migration and cultural blending were subtle forces, yet profoundly transformative. Northern customs mingled with Southern practices, resulting in hybrid traditions in language, art, music, and social norms. Families retained elements of their ancestral heritage while adapting to local rhythms, creating a society simultaneously divided and unified in spirit. The listener can picture markets where dishes of differing origin are sold side by side, scholars exchanging philosophical insights across regional dialects, and artisans borrowing techniques from neighbors whose lives were once distant. This is a history experienced slowly, quietly, and intimately, ideal for meditative reflection. Despite political fragmentation, the people maintained continuity in daily life. Farmers cultivated rice and wheat, guided by seasonal rhythms. Artisans crafted pottery, silk, and bronze with care, and merchants traveled cautiously along rivers and roads connecting north and south. Festivals, rituals, and family traditions provided anchors of familiarity and calm, even as dynasties rose and fell. For the listener, the night becomes a canvas upon which these routines unfold. The muted laughter of children in a courtyard, the steady rhythm of water wheels in a rice field, the soft sounds of a craftsman's tools shaping clay into vessels of quiet beauty. Philosophy and religion became common threads uniting the regions. Confucian teachings, emphasizing ethics, family, and governance, remained central to education and administration. Buddhism offered solace, reflection, and an ethical framework that transcended political borders. Taoist thought encouraged harmony with nature and patience with change. These ideas circulated quietly, connecting communities that were politically separated yet culturally intertwined. The night listener can sense the rhythm of study, meditation, and conversation, each reinforcing bonds that no battlefield could sever. This period illustrates a profound truth. Unity does not always arrive through conquest or politics. Instead, it can emerge through shared ideas, values, and practices. Even as kingdoms and dynasties divided the land, human creativity, philosophical reflection, and spiritual pursuit created a subtle cohesion, preparing the way for eventual reunification. For the listener, this is a calming realization that continuity can be maintained through thought, culture, and quiet human connection, even when political systems falter. By the end of this section, the audience sees a China divided in geography, but united in culture and human endeavor. The northern and southern dynasties were a time of gentle resilience, migration, and philosophical expansion, creating conditions for future integration. Rivers, mountains, and trade routes served as conduits for not just goods, but ideas, stories, and faith. Listeners are invited to drift through the quiet landscapes of North and South, feeling both the distinct rhythms of each region and the subtle currents that bind them together across distance and time. For the night listener, this section offers both engagement and calm reflection. Migration, cultural blending, and the rise of Buddhism are experienced as a slow, steady unfolding rather than dramatic upheaval. The listener senses that while borders divide, human thought and creativity transcend separation. In this quiet meditation on continuity amid fragmentation, China prepares itself for reunification, not through force alone, but through the endurance of culture, knowledge, and shared human experience. After centuries of division and gradual cultural blending, China found a path toward reunification under the Sui dynasty. Though the Sui ruled for only a brief period, their influence resonated far beyond their years, laying the foundation for the flourishing Tang dynasty that would follow. Central to their legacy was a vision of connection, physical, cultural, and administrative, that helped bind the vast empire together. For the night listener, this is a gentle exploration of infrastructure as a form of quiet power, illustrating how roads, rivers, and canals carry more than goods. They carry cohesion, ideas, and human continuity. The Sui emperors faced the immense challenge of governing a land divided for generations. They understood that unity could not rest solely on military strength. It required systems that allowed the flow of people, resources, and information. The most ambitious of these projects was the construction of the Grand Canal, an artificial waterway linking the fertile south with the political and cultural heartlands of the north. The canal was more than a feat of engineering. It was a lifeline, enabling food, textiles, and other goods to travel steadily and safely, supporting both urban centers and rural communities. For the night listener, it is easy to imagine long barges moving slowly through calm waters, carrying rice and silk, their passage a quiet rhythm threading the empire together. The construction of the canal required extraordinary coordination and human effort. Workers from villages along its route dug, dredged, and built locks and embankments, often under challenging conditions. While the labor was arduous, the collective effort created something enduring, a testament to human perseverance and ingenuity. For the listener, these scenes unfold not with tension or urgency, but as a meditation on collective endeavor, hands shaping earth, water flowing steadily along newly formed channels, and communities contributing to a project that would benefit generations yet to come. Beyond the Grand Canal, the Sui also reinforced roads and bridges, linking cities, towns, and administrative centers. Couriers could carry messages more efficiently, officials could travel to distant provinces with greater ease, and trade routes became safer and more predictable. These networks allowed the state to respond more effectively to local needs while encouraging cultural exchange and economic stability. Listeners can imagine roads stretching across gentle hills and plains, travelers pausing at inns and market towns, and the hum of activity moving quietly but persistently through the empire. The Sui dynasty also worked to strengthen the central bureaucracy. Officials were appointed carefully, records maintained meticulously, and governance became more uniform across the reunified territories. This administrative coherence, paired with the physical infrastructure of the canal and roads, created a sense of stability and order. For the night listener, this is a soothing reflection. Systems working quietly in the background, enabling everyday life to continue with predictability and rhythm, offering reassurance that vast human networks can operate in harmony when guided by thoughtful design. Cultural and economic life flourished quietly alongside these projects. Cities along the canal grew into bustling centers of trade, craft, and learning. Farmers benefited from more reliable transport of crops to distant markets. Artisans and merchants exchanged techniques and goods, fostering subtle cultural exchange even amid daily routines. The listener can imagine soft lantern lights spilling across riverside docks, the gentle clinking of goods being loaded, and the murmur of conversations in many dialects, all moving steadily along the calm arteries of connection the Sui had built. The dynasty's achievements, while impressive, were paired with the reality of human limits. The massive labor demands and ambitious projects placed strain on communities and resources. Yet, even in these challenges, the empire gained lessons that would inform future governance, infrastructure, and societal cohesion. For the night listener, it is a quiet reminder that progress is often the result of careful planning, human cooperation, and the patient shaping of both land and systems. Through the Grand Canal and strengthened administrative networks, the Sui dynasty set the stage for a period of brilliance in the Tang era. By connecting north and south, urban and rural, river and road, the Sui provided the foundation for commerce, cultural exchange, and political stability that would flourish for centuries. The listener can sense the gentle rhythm of this connectivity, waterways carrying sustenance, roads guiding travelers, and bureaucracies ensuring coordination, all creating a quiet, enduring harmony across the empire. By the end of this section, the audience understands that the Sui dynasty, though brief, was transformative. Its greatest achievement was not conquest or warfare, but connection, the subtle, patient work of uniting a diverse, expansive land through thoughtful infrastructure and governance. For the night listener, this evokes both wonder and calm. The realization that a single vision, carefully executed, can ripple through generations, shaping the lives of millions while maintaining a gentle, steady rhythm. The Grand Canal becomes a symbol of human ingenuity, persistence, and foresight. Rivers and roads, engineered and guided, carry not only goods and people but culture, ideas, and unity. In the quiet hours, one can imagine the still water reflecting lantern light, barges drifting slowly downstream, and distant towns receiving supplies and stories. The Sui dynasty teaches that empires endure not solely through the force of armies or the ambition of rulers, but through thoughtful design, shared effort, and the subtle yet profound connections that bind humanity together. As the listener drifts deeper into night, the Sui's legacy offers reflection on the quiet power of infrastructure, patience, and collective endeavor. The canals, roads, and networks are more than physical structures. They are metaphors for human connection, continuity, and the enduring pulse of civilization. Through them, China moves toward a future of renewed brilliance, setting the stage for the Tang dynasty's cultural and political flowering, all flowing quietly yet inexorably like the waters of the Grand Canal itself. The Tang dynasty ushered in a period of extraordinary prosperity, culture, and connectivity, often remembered as one of the brightest peaks in Chinese history. At its center was Chang'an, a city of vast streets, elegant architecture, and bustling markets, serving as both the political capital and a cultural heart that drew visitors from across Asia and beyond. For the night listener, this era unfolds as a meditation on human achievement, a world where art, governance, and daily life converge to create harmony, beauty, and subtle wonder. Chang'an streets were carefully planned, wide avenues stretching in orderly grids, lined with markets, workshops, and residences. Merchants from Persia, India, Korea, and Central Asia mingled with local traders, bringing silks, spices, precious stones, and the quiet rhythms of foreign music. Caravans arrived by land and river, unloading goods that carried both practical value and cultural significance. In the hush of night, one can imagine lanterns reflecting on cobblestones, the soft chatter of traders, and the gentle clinking of coins, a calm symphony that marks the heartbeat of a living city. The Tang court fostered arts and letters, encouraging poets, painters, and scholars to pursue their crafts. Figures like Li Bai and Du Fu composed verses that captured the beauty of mountains, rivers, and human emotion, weaving reflection and imagination together in ways that continue to resonate across centuries. Music floated gently through palaces and gardens, with melodies inspired by distant lands and local traditions alike. For the night listener, the cadence of poetry and music provides a soothing rhythm, inviting quiet contemplation of beauty, harmony, and the transient yet enduring nature of human creativity. Governance during the Tang was structured, yet adaptive. Civil service examinations ensured that talent could rise beyond mere birthright, drawing capable administrators from across the empire. Officials managed provinces, cities, and local communities with systems designed to sustain stability, justice, and prosperity. Roads and waterways, maintained with care, allowed ideas, goods, and governance to flow steadily. For the listener, there is calm reassurance in these rhythms, a society that balances order and creativity, allowing both human potential and everyday life to flourish quietly. Cosmopolitanism defined Tang culture. Foreigners brought languages, religions, and customs that mingled with local traditions. Buddhist monasteries became centers of learning and reflection, Taoist temples offered spiritual practice, and Confucian study halls preserved ethics and history. Citizens navigated these layers of culture with subtle awareness, blending new ideas with inherited knowledge. The night listener can imagine monks walking along moonlit paths, scholars studying texts by lamplight, and families observing rituals that reflect centuries of thought, creating a quiet harmony between tradition and innovation. Markets thrived under the calm guidance of infrastructure and administration. Silks, ceramics, spices, and art moved steadily through Chang'an and beyond, connecting urban centers and rural villages alike. Craftsmen refined their skills, creating objects of both utility and beauty, while farmers benefited from stable trade networks that allowed surplus goods to travel safely. For the listener, this evokes a sense of flowing rhythm, the gentle pulse of commerce moving in harmony with human effort, neither rushed nor chaotic, providing sustenance and enrichment alike. Education and scholarship reached new heights. Academies cultivated learning in history, literature, law, and philosophy. Knowledge was treated as a treasure, preserved, expanded, and shared. Students studied Confucian classics alongside emerging insights in astronomy, mathematics, and medicine, creating a quiet culture of inquiry and reflection. For the night listener, one can picture serene gardens, lantern-lit study halls, and scrolls unrolled across wooden tables, each scene reinforcing the enduring pursuit of understanding and wisdom. The Tang dynasty also saw the flowering of visual art. Paintings captured landscapes, court life, and the human figure with sensitivity and subtlety. Ceramics and sculpture reflected both technical mastery and aesthetic refinement. Even simple objects bore careful attention to form, color, and symbolism. The listener can drift into the meditative rhythm of creation, hands shaping clay, brushes gliding across silk, and gentle contemplation bringing beauty to life without urgency or noise. Daily life in Chang'an and the surrounding empire maintained a steady, satisfying rhythm. Families tended fields, prepared meals, and observed local rituals. Children learned practical skills alongside literature, and communities celebrated seasonal festivals with music, food, and quiet reflection. Even amid the grandeur of the capital, life retained its gentle cadence. The steady flow of rivers and canals, the soft footsteps on stone streets, and the whispers of merchants and artisans moving quietly through their routines. By the end of this section, the listener understands the Tang Golden Age as both extraordinary and accessible. Its achievements in poetry, governance, trade, and cosmopolitanism emerge not as distant abstractions, but as part of the lived experience of millions. The city of Chang'an becomes more than a capital. It is a symbol of harmony between human ambition, culture, and daily life. Nighttime in Tang China is calm, reflective, and rich with gentle curiosity, a meditation on how civilization can balance beauty, functionality, and imagination. For the night listener, the Tang dynasty is a reminder that culture, infrastructure, and human creativity can coexist quietly, yet profoundly. Streets, markets, temples, and gardens offer both routine and inspiration, connecting individuals to the broader rhythms of empire. Poetry floats over stone roads, lanterns illuminate study halls, and rivers carry goods and ideas with gentle consistency. The listener drifts alongside these currents, sensing the harmony of a civilization at its peak, an era defined not by haste or conquest, but by the steady, elegant cultivation of knowledge, beauty, and human connection. In this golden age, China reaches a point of cultural resonance that will echo through centuries. The listener is invited to follow the calm, intricate rhythms of city life, artistic creation, and intellectual pursuit, experiencing the subtle vibrancy of an empire alive with thought, trade, and imagination. Here, the heartbeat of Tang China becomes both soothing and captivating, a perfect balance for quiet reflection and gentle drifting toward sleep. The Song dynasty represents a remarkable turning point in Chinese history, a period where innovation, commerce, and urban culture flourished in ways that would shape the future of the world. Cities grew larger and more sophisticated, technology advanced, and markets thrived, creating a society of subtle brilliance. Yet, this era also reveals the fragile balance between human achievement and vulnerability, a reminder that cultural and technological sophistication does not always guarantee security. For the night listener, the Song period is a meditation on the delicate interplay between progress, prosperity, and impermanence. Urban life in Song China was unlike anything the world had seen. Cities such as Kaifeng and Hangzhou were bustling centers of trade, craft, and administration. Streets teemed with merchants, scholars, artisans, and families, all moving through daily routines that combined work, learning, and leisure. The soft clatter of wooden wheels on stone streets mingled with the low hum of conversation, creating a gentle rhythm that defined urban life. Lanterns glimmered in the evening, illuminating markets overflowing with silk, ceramics, spices, and tea. For the night listener, it is easy to imagine walking through these streets at dusk, absorbing the quiet energy and feeling the steady pulse of a civilization thriving at the intersection of tradition and innovation. Commerce and markets defined much of Song society. The dynasty's monetary system and widespread use of paper money allowed trade to expand rapidly, linking local towns to distant provinces. Merchants and artisans contributed to a dynamic economy, producing goods of beauty and utility that circulated across the empire. The rivers and canals that connected cities carried both commodities and ideas, enabling a subtle cultural exchange that shaped art, literature, and daily life. Nighttime brings a sense of calm rhythm to these exchanges. Barges drifting slowly under the moon, merchants counting coins carefully, and goods being traded with quiet diligence. Technology and innovation flourished in Song China. Gunpowder, first discovered centuries earlier, was refined for both ceremonial and military use, transforming the possibilities of conflict and defense. Printing technology, using movable type, spread knowledge faster than ever before, allowing literature, government documents, and scholarly works to reach wider audiences. Mechanical clocks, improved water wheels, and innovations in agriculture increased productivity and offered new ways of organizing time and labor. For the night listener, these advancements unfold like gentle ripples across society. The soft hiss of a furnace, the rhythmic turning of a water wheel, the careful stamping of printed pages, all creating a subtle undercurrent of progress that quietly reshapes daily life. Education and scholarship remain central to Song culture. Civil service examinations attracted talented young men from across the empire, ensuring that merit and knowledge played a role in governance. Schools, academies, and libraries became centers of intellectual life, cultivating expertise in philosophy, history, astronomy, and law. Scholars debated ideas under lantern light, copying texts with careful brush strokes and ink. The night listener can imagine these serene spaces, filled with the quiet concentration of students and teachers, where the pursuit of wisdom is both disciplined and meditative, guiding society with knowledge rather than force. The arts flourished in tandem with technological and economic growth. Painting, poetry, and calligraphy reached new heights, capturing landscapes, urban life, and the subtle emotions of everyday existence. Porcelain and ceramics were perfected, displaying both technical mastery and aesthetic refinement. Music and theater offered gentle entertainment, reflecting cultural values and enhancing social cohesion. For the listener, this is a world of sensory richness that unfolds slowly and deliberately. The brush gliding across paper, the quiet pluck of a stringed instrument, and the soft applause of a small audience enjoying the nuances of performance. Yet despite these achievements, Song China faced persistent vulnerabilities. Its military, though disciplined, often struggled to defend against nomadic incursions from the north. Borders were fluid, and the empire's brilliance did not always translate into strategic strength. For the night listener, this contrast is not anxiety-inducing but reflective. Even the most advanced societies can be fragile, their accomplishments delicate, balanced against forces beyond their control. It is a reminder that progress and fragility often coexist, each enhancing our appreciation of human effort. Daily life for ordinary citizens remained grounded, patterned by seasons, work, and ritual. Farmers cultivated rice, wheat, and tea, benefiting from improved irrigation and farming techniques. Artisans honed skills passed down through generations, creating textiles, ceramics, and metalwork for both practical use and aesthetic enjoyment. Families observed festivals, honored ancestors, and shared meals, anchoring communities in tradition even as innovation reshaped the broader world. The night listener can envision fields watered by gentle canals, workshops humming with quiet activity, and families gathered around evening meals, all part of the steady rhythm of life in Song China. Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucian philosophy continued to guide spiritual and ethical life. Temples and monasteries offered spaces for meditation, learning, and reflection. Individuals and communities integrated these teachings into daily routines, balancing practical labor with contemplation. Nighttime becomes a natural companion to these practices. Soft incense, quiet chants, and the measured footsteps of monks walking along temple corridors create a gentle, calming ambience. Listeners drift through these moments, sensing the spiritual as well as practical structures that shaped Song society. By the end of this section, the listener appreciates that the Song dynasty represents both brilliance and balance. It was a society of innovation, commerce, and intellectual achievement, yet acutely aware of its vulnerabilities. Cities, markets, rivers, and technologies created a rhythm of life that was at once advanced and human, practical and poetic. For those listening at night, the song offers calm engagement, an immersive reflection on how society's creativity, organization, and quiet resilience coexist, even under the shadow of fragility. In the Song dynasty, the birth of modern China emerges not through conquest alone, but through urbanization, trade, technological ingenuity, and cultural sophistication. The listener can imagine bustling streets, serene study halls, and flowing waterways, all operating in harmony to support a civilization alive with ideas, commerce, and art. This delicate balance between brilliance and vulnerability makes Song China a compelling, reflective meditation for nighttime listening. A civilization that is advanced, yet profoundly human in its rhythms, achievements, and quiet challenges. Amid the bustle of Song cities and the rhythm of daily life, art and philosophy offered quiet refuge, spaces where the mind could wander and the spirit could rest. Painters, poets, and scholars sought to capture the subtle beauty of the world, exploring landscapes, emotions, and the human experience with delicate attention. For the night listener, this is a moment to drift gently through mountains, rivers, and misty gardens, guided by brush strokes, words, and reflective thought. Landscape painting became a central form of expression during the Song dynasty. Artists depicted towering mountains, winding rivers, and distant horizons, emphasizing both the vastness of nature and the contemplative presence of humans within it. Trees swayed softly on painted scrolls, clouds drifted over valleys, and streams curved around rocks with a rhythm that seemed to mirror the quiet flow of life itself. Nighttime imagination allows these scenes to come alive gently. Mist curling over distant peaks, the faint reflection of moonlight on a still lake, and a solitary figure walking along a narrow path, absorbed in the serenity of the surroundings. Poetry, too, captured the soul of the Song era. Writers composed verses that spoke of fleeting moments, quiet reflection, and the harmony between humanity and nature. Lines evoked the gentle sounds of rivers, the subtle fragrance of blossoms, and the soft passage of seasons. Poetry offered both comfort and curiosity, drawing the listener into worlds of imagination without urgency or drama. One can hear the rhythm of words unfolding like the slow turn of a river, each stanza inviting reflection, calming the mind, and inspiring thought. Philosophy provided another lens through which people understood life and society. Confucian ideals guided ethics, family, and governance, emphasizing balance, respect, and responsibility. Taoist thought encouraged harmony with nature and patience with the passage of time, teaching that stillness often reveals more than action. Buddhism offered spiritual solace, contemplation, and meditation, helping individuals navigate the uncertainties of life. For the night listener, these philosophies merge into a soft current of reflection, a gentle awareness that human existence is part of a larger, interconnected flow. Art, landscape, and philosophy were not separate from daily life, but intertwined with it. A scholar might pause from study to gaze at a painting of distant mountains, drawing insight and inspiration. A poet could wander along a quiet canal, composing verses inspired by the reflection of trees and bridges. Temples, gardens, and libraries provided spaces where contemplation, creation, and observation met naturally. Listeners can imagine walking slowly through these spaces, feeling the rhythm of culture and thought flowing as softly as a breeze over water. This serene focus on beauty and meaning also offers a subtle counterbalance to the challenges of the period. While dynasties rise and fall and cities bustle with human activity, art and philosophy endure as quiet companions, inviting reflection and calm. They prepare the listener for transitions, offering a gentle sense of continuity even as political and social structures begin to shift. In the quiet of night, one senses that human creativity and contemplation provide a kind of immortality, a continuity that outlasts the temporal ambitions of rulers. By the end of this section, the listener is immersed in the meditative side of Song China. Mountains, rivers, poetry, and philosophical thought guide attention inward, creating calm curiosity and soft engagement. The audience is gently prepared for the next chapters, understanding that even as dynasties face decline, the beauty of human thought, art, and reflection persists, offering both solace and insight. In the early 13th century, the vast grasslands of the north gave rise to a new force, the Mongols. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, this nomadic people would extend their reach across Asia, eventually establishing rule over China. For the night listener, the story of the Yuan dynasty is less about conquest and destruction and more about transformation, the blending of cultures, ideas, and administration across a vast and diverse landscape. The calm rhythm of history unfolds slowly, revealing how a nomadic empire learned to govern the world's largest agrarian society with surprising nuance. The Mongol armies moved swiftly across open plains, their horsemanship and organization legendary. Yet, once they controlled China, their attention shifted from warfare to governance. The Mongols needed to maintain order, collect taxes, and ensure the smooth flow of trade and communication across a population far larger than their own. For the night listener, this is a gentle reflection on adaptability. The same people who had lived on steppe grasslands now administered cities, waterways, and farmlands with careful oversight, learning to integrate with a sedentary society rather than simply imposing force. Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis, emerged as a ruler who bridged cultures. Establishing the Yuan dynasty in 1271, he chose Beijing as his capital, a city that would grow into a center of administration, trade, and culture under Mongol guidance. Officials from across the empire, including Persians, Central Asians, and local Chinese scholars, contributed their knowledge to governance, finance, and infrastructure. Roads and postal stations were maintained to connect distant regions, ensuring that messages, trade, and people moved steadily through the empire. Nighttime imagination can picture couriers traveling along lantern-lit roads, carrying letters and parcels that bridge mountains, rivers, and deserts, quietly sustaining cohesion across vast distances. The Yuan dynasty was a period of cultural blending. The Mongols themselves adopted many aspects of Chinese governance, ritual, and ceremony, while also introducing influences from Central Asia and beyond. Art, music, and architecture reflected this fusion, combining traditional Chinese elements with designs and styles from distant lands. Markets carried goods from Persia, India, and Europe, creating a cosmopolitan atmosphere in major cities. For the night listener, one can visualize the soft glow of lanterns along riverbanks, the gentle murmur of multilingual traders, and the aroma of spices and teas drifting through streets, offering a subtle sense of a world connected through both commerce and culture. Daily life under the Yuan retained familiar rhythms for farmers, artisans, and families, even amid Mongol rule. Agricultural cycles continued, markets provided sustenance, and festivals honored seasonal and spiritual traditions. While taxation and administrative oversight were new, communities adapted, balancing continuity with change. The night listener can imagine quiet villages by rivers, farmers tending fields under soft moonlight, and artisans working steadily in workshops, human life persisting calmly within the sweep of imperial transformation. Trade and communication flourished along the Yuan Empire's networks. The famous Silk Road, revitalized under Mongol protection, allowed goods, ideas, and innovations to travel vast distances safely. Paper, tea, ceramics, and spices moved east and west, while scientific knowledge, astronomy, and engineering techniques circulated quietly between cultures. Nighttime reflection allows the listener to trace the gentle currents of exchange, rivers, roads, and caravans carrying not just commodities, but stories, skills, and knowledge that would endure long after the empire itself. Religions and philosophies coexisted in this era of blending. Buddhism, Taoism, Confucian traditions, and foreign beliefs all found space within the Yuan Empire, shaping education, art, and daily routines. Monks, scholars, and teachers contributed to an environment of learning and contemplation, offering calm spiritual guidance even as political structures shifted. For the night listener, temples, study halls, and quiet streets become spaces for reflection, echoing softly with chanting, writing, and thought, weaving a continuity of human inquiry across cultural differences. By the end of this section, the listener senses that the Yuan dynasty, while born from conquest, represents adaptation, integration, and transformation. It was not a mere imposition of force, but a careful balance between nomadic tradition and sedentary administration, between foreign influence and local continuity. The night listener can drift through cities, villages, and marketplaces, experiencing a world shaped by multiple currents of human activity, united under a ruler who valued both order and cultural engagement. The Mongol presence in China left enduring legacies, improved infrastructure, expanded trade, cross-cultural exchanges, and a nuanced understanding of governance across diversity. Nighttime reflection highlights the quiet rhythms of life under this dynasty: lantern-lit streets, the soft murmur of marketplaces, rivers carrying goods downstream, and the subtle blending of traditions across space and time. For the listener, the Yuan period becomes a meditation on adaptation, cultural synthesis, and the enduring flexibility of human society, preparing the mind gently for the transitions into the Ming and Qing eras that would follow. In this calm narrative, the Mongol conquest is not chaos, but transformation, a vast, flowing story of connection, administration, and cultural blending. As night deepens, listeners can appreciate the quiet endurance of human life, the blending of nomadic and settled worlds, and the gentle pulse of an empire that reshaped China without erasing its past, laying the foundation for the next chapters of dynastic history. After the Yuan dynasty, China sought a return to stability, tradition, and cultural pride. The Ming dynasty emerged in 1368, restoring native rule and reinforcing Chinese identity while embracing innovation, artistry, and exploration. For the night listener, this period unfolds as a journey through grandeur, ambition, and gentle human ingenuity, a civilization balancing reverence for the past with curiosity about the wider world. At the heart of Ming power was the construction of the Forbidden City in Beijing. Palaces, halls, and gardens stretched across a vast complex, their architecture precise, elegant, and symbolic. Red walls glowed softly in the lantern light, gold accents catching the early evening sun, while courtyards invited quiet reflection and ceremonial processions. The Forbidden City was not merely a residence. It was a statement of stability, authority, and cultural continuity. Nighttime imagination allows one to drift through its vast corridors and serene gardens, imagining officials walking silently across marble floors, the soft rustle of robes, and the distant murmur of water from carefully placed fountains. Beyond its political center, the Ming dynasty also looked outward. Under the leadership of the Admiral Zheng He, enormous fleets set sail across distant seas, visiting ports in Southeast Asia, India, the Persian Gulf, and East Africa. These voyages were both diplomatic and commercial, demonstrating Chinese capability and curiosity. For the night listener, one can picture giant wooden ships gliding through calm waters, sails catching a soft breeze, lanterns illuminating decks where sailors move with quiet purpose, and exotic lands appearing on the horizon like distant, inviting dreams. The Ming era was also a time of cultural revival and refinement. Porcelain production reached its peak, producing delicate blue and white wares that would later travel along trade routes worldwide. Painting, literature, and music flourished, with artists and scholars drawing inspiration from nature, history, and philosophical thought. Gardens were meticulously designed, reflecting principles of harmony and balance, inviting reflection and meditation. For listeners, this evokes gentle sensory imagery, the soft clink of porcelain, brush strokes spreading ink across paper, and the slow, steady rhythm of music flowing through halls and courtyards. Education and administration were central to the Ming worldview. Civil service exams ensured capable officials filled key posts, while governance emphasized stability, order, and responsiveness to local conditions. Roads, waterways, and postal networks allowed the empire to communicate efficiently across vast distances. Nighttime reflection allows the listener to imagine officials carrying documents along quiet roads, letters delivered through lantern-lit towns, and administrators reviewing records in calm study halls, each action part of a larger rhythm maintaining the empire's coherence. Exploration and trade coexisted with domestic growth. Maritime ventures brought new goods, knowledge, and ideas, connecting China with a wider world. Ports thrived, artisans experimented with techniques learned from afar, and maps were carefully drawn to chart seas, winds, and currents. The listener can drift through bustling docks at dawn, observing the preparation of ships, the careful loading of provisions, and the quiet determination of sailors ready to embark on long voyages. These scenes evoke calm curiosity, illustrating human ambition balanced by planning, skill, and patience. The Ming dynasty also emphasized infrastructure, repairing canals, fortifying cities, and maintaining roads. Agriculture remained the backbone of society, with irrigation, crop rotation, and local markets ensuring steady sustenance. Farmers, artisans, and merchants contributed to the subtle pulse of daily life, supporting both the capital and distant provinces. For the night listener, one can imagine quiet villages along the Grand Canal, fields nourished by gentle rivers, and artisans crafting goods with care, each small act reinforcing the stability and rhythm of the empire. At the same time, Ming rulers embraced symbolism and ritual to reinforce cultural identity. Ceremonies, seasonal festivals, and ancestor veneration remained central, connecting citizens to both tradition and the rhythm of time. Temples, gardens, and public spaces became stages for reflection, artistic expression, and communal observance. Nighttime imagery allows one to sense lanterns casting soft light across temple courtyards, the faint scent of incense, and the slow, deliberate steps of participants in ritual, a calm cadence threading together past and present. Despite the grandeur, the Ming period was not without challenge. The scale of governance, ambitious construction projects, and maritime exploration required careful management of resources and human effort. Yet these challenges were met with planning, organization, and an enduring sense of purpose. For the night listener, this balance between effort and calm achievement illustrates the gentle tension of human endeavor. Progress unfolds not through haste or chaos, but through patience, skill, and vision, creating a society both advanced and harmonious. By the end of this section, the listener appreciates the Ming Dynasty as a period of restoration, creativity, and outward-looking curiosity. The Forbidden City embodies stability and elegance. Zheng He's voyages evoke ambition and discovery, and cultural revival illuminates daily life with beauty and reflection. Streets, gardens, docks, and study halls carry both tradition and innovation, providing a subtle, continuous rhythm that guides the listener gently through the era. For those drifting toward sleep, the Ming Dynasty offers both calm and inspiration. Lantern-lit cities, tranquil gardens, flowing canals, and distant oceans become metaphors for human vision, coordination, and imagination. The era demonstrates that exploration, whether of the seas, culture, or ideas, can coexist with stability, reflection, and aesthetic harmony. Through these images, the listener experiences an empire confident in its creativity, patient in its endeavors, and poised at the intersection of tradition and discovery, a gentle reminder of the enduring human desire to connect, learn, and explore. In 1644, a new dynasty rose from the northeast. The Manchus, a people from beyond the Great Wall, established the Qing dynasty, the last imperial house of China. For the night listener, this period is a meditation on endurance, adaptation, and reflection, a civilization thousands of years old navigating the delicate balance between tradition and the pressures of a changing world. Rather than drama or alarm, the story unfolds gently, exploring how a great culture persisted even as new challenges emerged. The early Qing rulers were careful to preserve stability while integrating their own customs with long-established Chinese traditions. The Forbidden City continued as the heart of governance, its vast courtyards, elegant halls, and quiet gardens offering a sense of continuity. Officials and scholars, many versed in Confucian learning, guided administration with deliberate care. Nighttime imagery invites the listener to walk along stone paths under soft lantern light, through corridors where robes brush quietly against polished floors, and across gardens where the subtle fragrance of flowers mingles with the cool evening air. The Qing dynasty presided over a period of prosperity and growth. Agricultural innovation, improved irrigation, and trade networks sustained populations and communities. Cities expanded, markets thrived, and artisans produced exquisite works of porcelain, textiles, and painting. Poetry and literature flourished, continuing the legacy of centuries of Chinese scholarship. For the night listener, this is a calm reflection on human creativity and resilience. Rivers carrying goods through quiet towns, lanterns illuminating artisans at work, and scholars bent over scrolls under soft lamplight. Yet, prosperity coexisted with complexity. The Qing rulers managed a vast and diverse empire, balancing multiple ethnicities, languages, and local traditions. Governance required careful coordination and subtle diplomacy. Roads, canals, and postal networks moved information and resources across great distances, linking remote provinces to the capital. Nighttime imagination allows the listener to envision these channels humming with quiet activity, couriers on moonlit paths, boats drifting along canals, and officials reviewing records in serene study halls. The dynasty also faced external pressures. As the world beyond China evolved, foreign trade, naval expansion, and diplomatic contact introduced new ideas, goods, and challenges. The Qing maintained careful control over commerce and borders, yet global forces began to test even the most sophisticated systems. For the night listener, this evokes gentle reflection rather than alarm. A civilization adjusting to the rhythm of change, learning to accommodate distant influences while preserving its own enduring culture. Cultural life during the Qing was rich and reflective. Court rituals, seasonal festivals, and Confucian practices guided daily existence. Art continued to flourish. Landscape painting, calligraphy, and intricate porcelain demonstrated both technical mastery and contemplative beauty. Music, theater, and literature provided spaces for reflection and emotional resonance. Nighttime visualization invites quiet wandering through palace gardens, along rivers illuminated by lanterns, and across streets where markets and homes hum with the subdued rhythm of evening life. The Qing also preserved historical memory, maintaining archives, libraries, and educational institutions. Scholars studied dynastic histories, philosophical works, and classical texts, passing knowledge down through generations. Temples, academies, and gardens became spaces for thought and meditation, linking the wisdom of the past with the challenges of the present. The listener can imagine these serene places at night, scrolls unfurling across tables, soft brush strokes marking characters, and the gentle murmur of teachers guiding students in the subtle cadence of learning. By the 18th century, the Qing reached a height of territorial expansion and cultural influence, consolidating China's borders and integrating diverse regions into a coherent imperial framework. Yet, signs of vulnerability began to appear. Population growth, bureaucratic complexity, and global encounters created subtle tensions that required constant adjustment. For the night listener, this is a calm meditation on impermanence, the realization that even the most enduring civilizations must navigate change and uncertainty, and that fragility can coexist with grandeur. As the dynasty progressed, pressures from internal unrest, economic strain, and foreign intrusion gradually increased. These challenges would eventually contribute to the decline of imperial authority, yet the Qing period remains a testament to endurance, adaptation, and cultural achievement. Nighttime reflection emphasizes continuity over collapse. Lanterns still glow in streets, rivers still flow past ancient towns, and human life continues with quiet determination. The listener feels the rhythm of history as a flowing current, not abrupt or jarring, but steady and measured, carrying the story to its natural conclusion. By the end of this section, the listener appreciates the Qing dynasty as the final chapter in a continuous narrative spanning millennia. From Manchu integration and administrative sophistication to cultural flourishing and cautious adaptation, the dynasty embodies both the accomplishments and the vulnerabilities of imperial China. It is a period of reflection, showing how a civilization thousands of years old met the pressures of a changing world while preserving its identity and values. For those listening at night, the Qing dynasty provides a gentle sense of closure. Lantern-lit streets, palace gardens, rivers, and libraries evoke continuity and calm, while the story of a society adapting gracefully to internal and external pressures reinforces a sense of narrative completion. The listener is left with the soothing understanding that China's long imperial journey, with all its art, philosophy, governance, and innovation, culminates in a rhythm that endures beyond the rise and fall of dynasties, an enduring heartbeat that will continue to echo through history.